Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Midnight Stories. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to fall asleep. So before you drift off, I thought it would be nice if everyone could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. All right, let's get comfy, relax, and begin. The Hendersons lived in a quiet neighborhood. A white two-story house with trimmed hedges, wind chimes on the porch, and a swing set in the backyard. That Saturday evening, I was babysitting their two kids, Ben, 6, and Maddie, 4. I was 16 then, saving up for a used car, and babysitting gigs paid well enough. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson were going to a company dinner, not too far away. They'd be back around midnight. It was just after 6 when they left. Maddie had her teddy bear clutched to her chest, and Ben was already glued to the TV. They waved goodbye at the door, and I double-locked it after them. I always did that. The neighborhood was safe, but I didn't take chances. Dinner was chicken nuggets, apple slices, and juice boxes. I cut their food small and made sure Maddie didn't choke. After they ate, we played with Legos for a bit. Maddie lost interest fast and asked to color instead. Ben stayed on the floor, building some kind of spaceship. At 8, I got them both in pajamas. I read them Goodnight Moon and The Giving Tree. Ben always asked questions during stories. Maddie always drifted off faster. By 8:40, they were out. I left their bedroom door open a crack, turned on the hallway nightlight, and went back downstairs with the baby monitor clipped to my shirt. I settled into the couch, TV on low. I had homework in my backpack, but I wasn't going to touch it. I flipped through channels for a while. Then I heard the phone ring. It was the landline. Most people didn't call the house phone unless it was the Hendersons or maybe a neighbor. I got up and walked into the kitchen where the cordless sat on the wall. I picked it up. No one spoke. I said hello again. Still nothing. Just the faintest sound of breathing. Not heavy or exaggerated. Just there, like someone trying not to be noticed. I hung up. My first thought was telemarketer, but something about the breathing stuck with me. I checked the baby monitor. The kids were fine. Ben had kicked his blanket off. Maddie was curled into a ball. 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same number, same nothing, just that breathing. I hung up quicker this time. I wasn't panicking, not yet, but my stomach had that dull, tight feeling, like something was off, but my brain hadn't caught up to it yet. I sat back on the couch. I lowered the TV volume even more. Every creak in the house felt louder. Another 15 minutes passed. Phone rang. When I answered this time, the voice spoke. "Have you checked the children?" It was a man's voice. Not deep, not whispery. Flat, like he was bored. I stood there frozen. Then he hung up. My hand was shaking. I checked on the kids through the monitor again. They were still in bed. I couldn't hear anything strange from their room. I grabbed my phone from my backpack and called the Hendersons. It rang 6 times. No answer. Next, I called 911. I told them someone was prank calling me while I was babysitting. The woman on the other end asked if I knew the caller. I said no. I told her what he said. She told me to keep the doors locked and that they'd try to trace the next call if he phoned again. I hung up and turned off the TV. The house felt huge when it was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with the cordless phone in my hand, just waiting. It rang again 10 minutes later. Same voice. Same question. "Have you checked the children?" I didn't answer. I just listened. He didn't hang up this time. I could hear him breathing again. Slower now. Then I heard something else. Faint. A tap. 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 Like fingernails lightly drumming a surface. Then he hung up. I called the police again. This time I didn't care if they thought I was overreacting. I told them he'd called again. I told them he was watching me. I was sure of it now. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me. She told me to stay calm. I could hear her typing in the background. After maybe a minute, her voice changed. She asked me to confirm the address. I told her. She paused. Then she said, "We're sending a patrol car right now. Do not hang up the phone. Stay where you are." Something in her tone made my chest tighten. I asked her what was going on. She didn't answer directly. She just told me to stay on the line and keep myself safe. Another minute passed. Then she said, "The call." It came from inside the house. I didn't even respond. My knees buckled and I sat down hard on the kitchen tile. Inside the house, I could feel my throat close up. She kept talking, trying to calm me, but her voice sounded far away. My eyes darted around the kitchen. The pantry door was closed. The laundry room was dark. The garage door was locked. I remembered checking it. I stood up and walked slowly to the stairs. The baby monitor was still on. Ben was snoring lightly. Maddie mumbled something in her sleep. The line with the dispatcher was still open. She was saying the officers were 2 minutes away. I crept up the stairs, step by step, barefoot, so I wouldn't make noise. When I got to the top, I could hear something. A faint click. I stopped breathing. It was coming from the kids' room. I inched closer. The hallway nightlight made everything a weird orange color. The baby monitor caught it first. Static, then a burst of muffled movement. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a tall metal floor lamp from the hallway. I unplugged it and held it like a bat. Then I opened the kids' door. The room was still. Ben rolled over. Maddie was under her blanket. No one else. I checked the closet. Empty. Under the bed. Nothing. Behind the curtains. Just the window, shut and locked. I was starting to think maybe I'd lost it. Maybe the guy wasn't in the house. Maybe it was just some freak glitch in the phone system. Then I noticed it. The attic hatch in the hallway ceiling. It was slightly ajar. I stood there, holding that lamp, staring up. The hatch was about 10 feet up. The metal pull-string ladder was folded up tight, but the panel was cracked open half an inch. Just enough. The dispatcher was still on the line. I told her what I saw. She told me to get the kids and leave the house. Now, I didn't wait. I went back in, scooped Maddie up in one arm, shook Ben awake with the other. He was groggy, asking what was happening. I didn't answer. I just said, "We're leaving." Quietly, I carried Maddie. Ben followed behind me in his pajamas, clutching my hoodie. We went down the stairs slow. I didn't want to make noise. Every creak felt deafening. When we reached the bottom, I went straight to the front door and unlocked it. I yanked it open and ran out with the kids. We made it halfway down the driveway before the patrol car pulled up. 2 officers jumped out. One took the kids. The other walked me back to the porch. I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. I pointed at the attic. They cleared the house room by room. 15 minutes later, one of them came out and said they'd found clear signs someone had been up there. Footprints in the dust, an empty water bottle, candy bar wrappers, and a burner phone. That was how he'd been calling me. He must have been hiding up there the whole time, maybe even before I arrived. There was no attic light, so they had to use flashlights. But they said it looked like he'd made a little spot for himself. A sleeping bag, a small pillow. The back door's lock had fresh scratches. He'd probably slipped in earlier while the Hendersons were getting ready, maybe while they were loading the car. He must have hidden in the attic and waited. He was gone now. They never caught him. The burner phone was wiped. No prints, no name, just that voice. That calm, bored voice. I quit babysitting after that. I kept having dreams of that attic door swinging down in the night, of opening a closet and finding someone standing there, just breathing. The Hendersons installed cameras after that. New locks, even moved a year later. But I'll never forget that night, because someone had been in the house with me, watching me, calling me, waiting. I moved into the apartment in late spring. It was small, just one bedroom and a narrow kitchen that looked into the living room. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and after a few years of living with roommates or couch surfing between jobs, I was glad to finally have a space of my own. The building was older, probably built in the 60s, with a cracked walkway leading to the front door and uneven steps. The paint on the hallway walls was chipped, and sometimes the water ran brown for a second before it cleared. But the rent was cheap, and it was close to my work. That was enough. At first, everything's fine. I unpacked slowly, taking my time to settle in. The kitchen was cramped, but I liked cooking, and I made it work. I kept my groceries organized. Cans on the left side of the cabinet, spices on the right. Frozen meals stacked neatly. Nothing fancy, mostly eggs, cereal, rice, frozen chicken, box pasta. I lived alone and didn't eat much. After work, I'd come home, eat something simple, and watch a show before heading to bed. My routine was predictable. It took about 2 weeks before I started noticing little things that were off. The first time, I thought I was imagining it. I was reaching for a can of beans I was sure I had bought, but it was gone. Just gone. I figured maybe I hadn't bought it like I thought. It's easy to forget things. Then I noticed the cereal. I had a box of honey oats I'd eaten only once. But when I opened the box again, it was halfway gone. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember if I had eaten more than I thought, but I was certain I hadn't. Still, I told myself maybe I was mistaken. I wasn't used to living alone, after all. A few nights later, I heard noises. Not loud, but definite. A soft creak like someone stepping on old wood. I paused my show listening, but it stopped. It came again the next night, around the same time. A faint thump, like something falling in the kitchen. I got up, turned on the light, and looked around. Nothing. Everything was in place. I stood there for a while, just listening to the silence. The apartment had this tiny closet near the kitchen with a low shelf above the jackets. I never paid much attention to it, but that night I looked up at it and felt something, unease, the kind that creeps up on you quietly. A few more days went by. I tried to ignore it all. I didn't have time to be paranoid. Work was stressful. I was tired most days. But the food kept disappearing, small amounts at first. A slice of bread missing. A banana I didn't eat. Milk that tasted like it had been opened already. It wasn't enough to be obvious unless you were looking for it, but I was starting to notice. One evening after work, I opened my fridge and stopped. A plastic container I had filled with leftover pasta was empty, just rinsed clean and sitting where I'd left it. I stood there for a full minute, my mind trying to work it out. I hadn't eaten it. I hadn't rinsed it. I lived alone. I locked all the windows that night, double-checked the front door, and turned on a hallway lamp before bed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. It was faint but unmistakable, a cough. Dry, muffled, coming from inside the wall. I sat straight up. My heart thumped so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I didn't move for a long time. Just listened. Silence followed. I told myself I must have imagined it. Maybe through a vent, maybe from a neighbor. But it didn't feel like that. It had felt close. Too close. I couldn't sleep after that. I laid there in the dark, eyes wide, every sound amplified. The apartment seemed to be breathing around me. Creaks, distant hums, faint drips from the bathroom sink. Every hour passed slow. The next morning, I went through the apartment carefully. I opened every cabinet, every drawer, looked behind the shower curtain, under the bed. I stood on a chair to reach that high shelf in the closet by the kitchen. I ran my hand along the wood, knocking slightly. Something sounded hollow. I pressed harder and felt a slight give. The back panel wasn't fully secured. I pulled at it, and the thin plywood shifted, revealing a small, dark opening behind it. I backed away. I didn't go in. Not then. I put the panel back and didn't touch it again. The thought that someone might be in there, that they could be watching me, was too much. I felt sick. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want to be seen as crazy. Maybe because I hoped I was wrong. That day, I went out and bought a small camera. One of those motion-activated ones meant for pets. I set it up in the kitchen, facing the pantry and the closet, hidden behind a stack of books on the shelf. I let it run for 2 days. On the third day, I watched the footage. It was around 1:40 a.m. when I saw it. The closet door eased open slowly, carefully. A figure emerged, a man. Thin, dirty, wearing what looked like an oversized hoodie and dark pants. His face was gaunt, unshaven, and his movements were slow, deliberate. He walked barefoot into the kitchen, opened the fridge, pulled out a container, and ate straight from it. Then he drank milk from the carton, wiped his mouth with his sleeve, and crept back toward the closet. He paused, looking around, then disappeared behind the panel. I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up with a knife beside me and the hallway light on. Every little noise made me jump. The next morning, I called the police. They arrived quickly. I showed them the footage, and their expressions changed instantly. 2 officers stayed with me, while another called for backup. They pried open the panel in the closet and found a narrow crawl space, just wide enough for someone to squeeze through. Inside, they found a sleeping bag, empty food containers, clothing, and trash. There were scratch marks on the walls, like he'd used his fingernails or a key to dig at the corners. The space smelled like sweat and rot. It was hard to breathe near it. They searched the rest of the building, and about 2 hours later, they found him. He was hiding in the basement, behind a pile of old furniture and cardboard boxes. He didn't resist. They said he looked disoriented, possibly mentally unstable. He hadn't attacked me or taken anything valuable, just food and space and time. The detective said he'd likely been living in the building for a while, long before I moved in. Maybe months, maybe longer. They believed he used to live there legitimately. Maybe a previous tenant, maybe a squatter who'd found access during renovations or vacancy periods. He must have figured out how to move between the walls and the basement without being noticed. The closet crawl space wasn't visible unless you were really looking for it. He'd been waiting for the right time, watching for someone who lived alone, someone who left at regular hours. I worked 9 to 5, so it was easy for him to come out when I wasn't around. He ate small amounts to avoid drawing attention, washed dishes to not raise suspicion, stayed hidden whenever I was home. The thing that made my skin crawl was how quiet he had to be. Every step, every sound, he kept it all low enough not to wake me. But he coughed. Once. That one slip had been enough. The police took everything, his belongings, the camera footage, even parts of the closet panel for evidence. I asked them how often this kind of thing happened. One of the officers looked at me and said more often than people think, especially in older buildings, ones with crawl spaces, basements, or in used maintenance paths. People slip through cracks when no one's looking. I stayed at a friend's place that night, and the next. I couldn't go back. Every corner of that apartment felt tainted. The idea that someone had watched me, know my habits, move through my home while I slept, it made my skin feel too tight. I broke the lease, lost my deposit. I didn't care. I packed what I could and left the rest behind. It's been months now. I live in a different part of the city, in a newer building with security and cameras and no hidden spaces. I still check the closets at night, still put a chair under the doorknob when I sleep, still flinch when the floor creaks. People think the scariest things in life are the big, dramatic ones. Car crashes, break-ins, random violence. But sometimes the scariest things are quiet, slow, invisible, like someone living in your walls, eating your food, watching you every night, waiting for you to leave so they can pretend they live there too. And the worst part is, if he hadn't coughed, I might never have known. It happened on a cold Friday evening in late October, a day that started just like any other. I had stayed after school for a club meeting, and by the time I started walking home, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The air smelled like wet leaves and would smoke. I remember my breath coming out in white puffs as I walked the familiar route along the edge of our small town. I didn't think much of it. My backpack was heavy with books, and my hands were stuffed into the sleeves of my jacket. The sidewalk was empty, the streetlights buzzing softly above. I was only 15 years old. I had taken that same road hundreds of times. It was lined with trees and quiet houses with neat little yards. Some had Halloween decorations up, plastic skeletons, fake spider webs, orange lights. Everything seemed completely normal until I passed the empty lot near the edge of our street, where the sidewalk narrowed and the shadows got deeper. I remember hearing a car engine idling, then a sudden sound behind me, fast footsteps. That's the last memory I have of that night. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Damp concrete, mold, something like old plastic. I was lying on a thin mattress, wrapped in a scratchy blanket. My head ached and my throat was dry. There was no light, just pitch black. I couldn't see anything, not even my own hand in front of my face. I reached out around me and felt the walls. Cold, smooth, water. I started to panic, my breathing sharp and quick. I screamed until my voice went hoarse, pounded on the walls, kicked the door. I didn't even know where the door was at first. I tried everything. No one came. There was no sound except me. It was like I'd been dropped into a hole and buried alive. Hours passed, then maybe days. I don't know. Time doesn't feel real in a place like that. Eventually, the lights flicked on without warning. I covered my eyes from the sudden brightness. A soft hum filled the room, something mechanical like a vent or fan. The room was small. A steel door, one bucket in the corner, a shelf with some folded clothes, and a plastic container that held stale crackers, a water bottle, and a toothbrush. That was it. No window, no clock, nothing to give any sense of time or place. At first, I thought maybe someone would come in and hurt me. But nobody did, not right away. I was completely alone. Hours passed, or maybe days. Food appeared outside the door at irregular times. I never saw who brought it. A small flap in the bottom of the steel door would open just long enough for a tray to slide through. Then it would shut. That was the only contact I had. I screamed through that flap, cried, begged. No answer ever came. After the first few weeks, I started keeping track of the days by scratching marks into the wall with a broken plastic spoon I'd hidden. But eventually I lost count. I would wake up, eat, lie there, stare at the walls, sleep, repeat. The light stayed on for what felt like endless stretches, then would shut off randomly. There was no pattern. I couldn't even tell day from night anymore. The only thing that changed was sometimes music would play through a small speaker in the ceiling. Soft, tinny old songs. Sometimes children's lullabies. Sometimes static. Once, the Pledge of Allegiance played on loop for what felt like hours. I thought I would lose my mind. I started talking to myself just to hear a voice. I made up fake conversations. Pretended I was home. Pretended I was safe. But deep down, I stopped believing I ever would be again. I tried to escape dozens of times. I checked every inch of the walls for cracks. I banged on the door with the food tray. I screamed until my voice was gone. I even tried to starve myself once, hoping someone would have to come in and check on me. They didn't. Food just kept showing up. Sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes nothing for a day or two. Then it would come again. I lost so much weight I could see every rib and bone in my arms. My hair started falling out in clumps. My fingernails cracked. I was always cold, even when the lights were on. It wasn't just the hunger or loneliness. It was the not knowing who had taken me, why, where I was, if anyone was looking for me, if I was even still in the same state. The thought that broke me over and over was that the world had moved on, that people forgot, that maybe I was already dead to them. Then one day, I heard footsteps, real ones, loud, heavy, coming closer. I crawled into the corner and held my breath. The steel door opened. My eyes took a moment to adjust. It was a man wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, set down a tray with food and a folded blanket, then closed the door again. I screamed at him. I threw the tray at the door, but he didn't say a word. That was the only time I ever saw him. After that, things changed a little. Sometimes the food got better. Microwaved meals, fruit. I was given a comb, a pair of shoes, even a small mirror. I started getting clean clothes once a week. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if it was good or bad. It just made me more confused. Was he trying to keep me alive? Was this forever? Over time, I started remembering less and less of who I had been. I could barely picture my parents' faces. I forgot my own birthday. I forgot what my bedroom had looked like. The walls in that room became my whole world. I stopped hoping. I stopped trying to escape. I just existed. And then, 3 years later, everything changed. It was a morning, I think, because the food had come a few hours earlier. I was lying on a mattress when I heard the sound of boots. More than one person. Then yelling, metal banging, a loud crash. The door slammed open and light flooded the room. 2 people in black uniforms rushed in shouting. One of them knelt down beside me and said something I couldn't understand. My ears were ringing. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would explode. I was pulled out of the room into a long hallway, past more doors just like mine. I couldn't walk. They had to carry me. I was rushed up a narrow staircase, through another door, into sunlight. Blinding, warm sunlight. I sobbed. I hadn't felt the sun on my skin in over 1,000 days. They put me into the back of an ambulance, hooked wires to my chest, gave me water. I remember the look on the EMT's face when I asked what year it was. She looked like she wanted to cry. When she told me, my hand started shaking uncontrollably. I had been gone for over 3 years. What I didn't know yet, what no one knew right away, was who had done it. At first, it didn't even tell me. I was taken to a hospital and then a secure care facility. I had to relearn everything. How to eat regular food, how to walk for long stretches, how to talk to people. I couldn't stand being in rooms with doors that shut. I'd panic in the shower. I couldn't sleep unless a light was on. I had to take pills just to calm my nerves. Then one day, my therapist told me, not the details, just the name. It was Mr. Harlan, Mike Harlan, our neighbor, the man who lived 5 houses down, the one who had helped put up the missing posters, who'd stood next to my mother at the town meetings, who had knocked on doors and passed out flyers, who hugged my father and told him he was praying every night. He had built that room under a workshop on his property, soundproofed it, hid it under years of junk and tarps and tools. The police had only found it because a new detective had followed a gut feeling about an odd electricity bill, too high for a workshop that wasn't supposed to be in use. When they searched his place, they found notebooks, pages and pages of observations, logs of everything I ate, when I slept, what I did. He had watched me for months before taking me. He knew my routine, knew the gaps, the places without cameras. He had planned it down to the minute. The worst part? Everyone had trusted him. He was friendly, soft-spoken, volunteered at the food bank, gave out candy at Halloween. No one had suspected him, not once. And all that time, I was just a few blocks away, trapped in a room underground while the people looking for me stood right above my head. When it all came out, the town couldn't believe it. People wept in court when the evidence was shown. He pleaded not guilty, claimed I had run away and he had rescued me, said I stayed willingly. The jury didn't believe him. He was sentenced to life without parole. But the damage he did to me, to my family, to our community, can't be undone by any sentence. It took a long time to feel like I was part of the world again. For months, I couldn't be in crowds, couldn't go into basements, couldn't hear certain songs without shaking. I still flinch when I hear the sound of keys turning in a lock. But I've gotten stronger. I have a dog now. I keep my windows open. I take long walks in the sun. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, heart racing, thinking I'm back in that room. But then I see the light, and I remember where I am. I'm 21 now. I've started college. I study psychology. I want to work with kids who've been through trauma. I want them to know they're not broken, that they're not alone. I still have scars, inside more than outside, but I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not afraid of silence. I'm not afraid of memories. He stole 3 years from me. But he didn't take everything. He didn't take who I am. I survived, and I'm still here. I was in my second year of college when I decided to get my own place. I was tired of living in the dorms, sick of the noise, the shared bathrooms, the constant clatter of other people's lives bleeding into mine. I wanted space, quiet. A kitchen that didn't smell like burnt popcorn or instant noodles. But rent wasn't cheap, and I knew I couldn't swing it alone. So I found a small 2-bedroom apartment just a few blocks from campus, tucked behind a row of laundromats and grocery stores. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. The lease was manageable if I found someone to split it with. I figured it'd be easy. College town, tons of people looking for a place. I posted an ad on Craigslist. The ad was simple. Female college student looking for roommate. Clean, quiet, not a partier. Looking for same. I added a few photos of the apartment. White walls, small living room, decently sized bedrooms. Old carpet, but nothing disgusting. The kitchen had this ugly brown linoleum, and the fridge made a low hum, but everything worked. I put my phone number and email at the bottom and hit post. The first few responses were exactly what I expected. Girls my age, a couple grad students, one woman in her 30s who seemed nice but wanted to bring her cat, and I was allergic. Some of the messages were clearly spam. One person asked if I'd be okay with Nudist Tuesdays. I ignored that one. Then I got a message from a guy named Mark. His email was short. He said he was in his late 20s, recently moved to the area, working part-time while finishing his degree. He didn't mention which school, but said he liked the photos of the place and wanted to come by to see it in person. He didn't sound weird or creepy. His grammar was fine. Nothing stood out. I hesitated. I'd originally imagined another woman, someone I could maybe become friends with, study with sometimes, not feel awkward around. But Mark seemed normal, polite, respectful. I told him he could stop by that weekend. He showed up right on time, Saturday afternoon, wearing jeans and a dark gray hoodie. He was clean-shaven, medium height, brown hair, thin build. The kind of person your eyes slide off of in a crowd. Not ugly, not striking. Just average. I opened the door and gave him a quick tour. He didn't touch anything, didn't make any offhand comments. Just nodded, looked around, said nice once or twice. I showed him the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom, both bedrooms. I told him rent would be due on the 1st of each month, and that utilities usually ran about $100 each. He said that sounded reasonable. He didn't ask many questions, but seemed interested. Still, something about him made me uneasy. It was subtle, hard to describe. He never smiled. His eyes moved around a lot, not in a nervous way, more like he was scanning things. Like he was checking the corners of the room, the layout, the doors, the windows. When I showed him the hallway closet, he stood in front of it for a second too long before nodding and turning away. I don't know what I expected from the visit. I'd met strangers off Craigslist before, sold an old microwave, bought a used bike. You always feel a little weird around people you don't know. But with Mark, it was different. Not because he did anything wrong. He didn't flirt, didn't get too close, didn't make jokes about sharing a bathroom. But there was something off. Not wrong in an obvious way, just not right. After the tour, he thanked me and said he'd let me know by Monday. I said sure, just shoot me an email. He walked out, and I locked the door behind him. I didn't hear from him again. By Wednesday, I'd already forgotten about him. Another girl had reached out, Jess, a junior from a neighboring college. We hit it off immediately. She moved in the following week, brought a little bookshelf and a tea kettle and some plants she kept on the windowsill. She had an easy laugh and was gone most of the day for her classes and job, and we shared cleaning duties without ever needing to talk about it. It worked. A few months went by. The semester ended. Then another began. Life went on. I never thought about Mark again. Not until the news broke. It was mid-April, a rainy Thursday. I was eating cereal and scrolling through social media when I saw the headline. Man arrested in connection with multiple Craigslist murders. I clicked the link without thinking. It was one of those local news websites full of ads and pop-ups. But the name stopped me cold. Mark Lacey. My cereal spoon hovered over the bowl. I clicked on the video. The news anchor had that serious tone, like she was trying to sound calm, but important. She said Mark Lacey, 29, had been arrested the night before at a motel just outside of town. Police had linked him to at least 4 murders, possibly more. All the victims were women. All had posted ads looking for roommates or tenants. He would respond, meet them, and then disappear. The killings happened days or sometimes weeks later, not always at the time of the meeting. My stomach dropped. I froze. They showed his mugshot. Same brown hair, same eyes, same hoodie, I swear to God. He looked a little rougher now. There were dark circles under his eyes. His hair was messy, but it was him. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I got up and closed the blind without really knowing why. My hands were cold. I looked over at the front door at the deadbolt. I turned it, even though I knew it was already locked. Just came out of her room a few minutes later, saw the news still playing, and asked what was going on. I told her quietly. She sat down on the armrest of the couch and watched in silence. That night, I didn't sleep. For days, the story unfolded in the news. They found one victim in a storage unit 2 counties over. Another was buried in a shallow grave behind an abandoned property. The third had been missing for months. Her body hadn't even been recovered yet, but her name was released. A college student, like me, like all of them. The police said he used Craigslist to find potential victims, but he didn't kill all of them. Some, like me, he just met and left. The theory was that he'd case the places, check out the layout, the exits, the locks, and then come back later. Maybe when they were alone, maybe when they least expected it. I kept going over everything. Our short meeting, the way he looked at the closet, the way he studied the windows. I realized he'd never once looked at me when I spoke. Not directly. He looked at the apartment, at the structure. He didn't care about me. Not in a normal way. I was just part of the environment. I remembered something else too. When I showed him the back bedroom, the one I ended up taking for myself, he'd paused at the doorframe. He stood there, quiet, like he was measuring something in his head. Then he'd looked up toward the ceiling and down again and nodded. I thought he was just being polite. Now I wasn't sure. I started checking the windows every night, relocking the doors. Jess noticed, but didn't say anything. She started doing the same. I kept wondering, why didn't he choose me? I don't say that like I wish he had. God, no. But I think about it. Why did he skip me? Was it the layout? Did he not like the street? Was it something about me? Did I say something that made me seem suspicious? Or did he just pass me over? Was I lucky? Did something scare him off? I'll never know. And that's what gets to me. The randomness of it. I wasn't smarter than anyone else. I wasn't prepared. I didn't spot the danger. I didn't call the police. I didn't even trust my gut enough to turn him away. I let him in, gave him a tour, smiled. I even shook his hand at the end, and he walked out. They never found all the bodies. Last I read, they believed there were at least 2 more, but they couldn't be sure. He wasn't talking. He'd lured up. No confession, no details, just a list of names and photos the police had to piece together one at a time. I stopped using Craigslist. I deleted my account. I told everyone I knew to do the same. Weeks later, I got a call from a detective. He wanted to ask me a few questions. I told him everything I remembered. He asked if Mark had touched anything. I said no. He asked if he'd asked about my schedule or my roommate's schedule. I said no, not directly. Just general questions. Nothing stood out. He asked if I still lived in the same apartment. I said yes. He paused. Then he told me to be careful. Not in a scary way, just in a way that made me feel small. Exposed. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I looked around the room. The dresser, the closet, the window with the old blinds, the door that didn't lock quite right unless you pulled it hard, the hallway, the soffit of the fridge. I started to wonder if I should move, but I didn't. Ren was good. Jess was a great roommate, and I told myself it was over. He was in jail. Done. Locked away. But that didn't stop me from waking up sometimes in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard footsteps outside the door. It didn't stop me from jumping every time I heard someone knock. It didn't stop the dreams. Not nightmares, exactly. Just memories warped. In one, I open the door again, and he walks past me without a word and sits on the couch. In another, I'm showing him the bedroom, and he turns, shuts the door behind me, and smiles. None of it happened, but it could have, and that's the worst part. It could have. I stayed at the Cecil Hotel for a week in February 2013. I had come to Los Angeles for a job interview and needed somewhere cheap to stay. The Cecil popped up on one of those budget hotel websites. The pictures made it look a little old, but decent enough. Clean rooms, central location, free Wi-Fi. I was between jobs, broke, and running out of options. So I booked it. The lobby looked nicer than I expected. Marble floors, gold trim on the ceiling, big mirrors on the walls. But the elevator was old, the kind that made you wait forever and then groan like it hated every floor. My room was on the 10th floor. When I first stepped inside, the smell hit me. Not rotten or anything, just this faint, musty, metallic smell. I thought maybe the AC filters were dirty or the pipes were rusting. It wasn't unbearable, just strange. The room itself was small. One queen bed, a desk with a missing drawer, a CRT TV that barely worked, and a bathroom that always seemed damp even when I hadn't used it. The water was weird from the start. The pressure was low, like it dribbled out of the tap instead of pouring. I had to cup my hands under the faucet for a while just to wash my face. The taste was off too, like copper or iron or something else I couldn't place. I figured the pipes were old. I brushed my teeth with bottled water after the first night. I didn't spend much time in the room during the day. I was out looking for work, dropping off resumes, going to interviews that didn't go anywhere. But every night I came back, the place felt heavier. I don't know how else to put it. Like the walls were soaking up something invisible, and it got thicker every day. I slept with the TV on, not for the noise, just so there was something else in the room with me. On the third night, I was brushing my teeth in the dim yellow light of the bathroom. The water barely trickled from the tap. I gave up, rinsed with bottled water, and turned to leave when I noticed the bathtub faucet was dripping. Just one slow drop every few seconds. I hadn't used the tub, but maybe the last guest had messed up the knob. I bent down to tighten it and noticed something else. The drip wasn't clear. It was slightly cloudy, maybe even reddish. I stood up quick, told myself it was rust, and went to bed. The next morning, I took a shower because I had an important interview. The water came out dark at first, like it always did, but after a few seconds it cleared up. I stepped in. The pressure was still terrible. I stood there under that weak stream, trying to clean myself, and that smell came back. It was stronger now. Wet metal, old blood, something thick. I got through the shower as fast as I could and got out. That day, something strange happened in the elevator. It was the first time I noticed how long it stayed open between floors. I pressed the button for my floor, and instead of closing right away, the doors would stay open for several seconds, longer than normal. That day, I pressed 10, and the doors just sat open. No ding, no movement, just wide open. I reached out to press the door close button and paused when I saw a shadow in the hallway. Not a person, just the tail end of movement, like someone had turned the corner fast. I didn't think much of it. The hotel was full of people, travelers, long-term renters, probably even people living there unofficially. Still, I found myself looking behind me more often after that. On my 5th night, the water changed again. It came out almost black for the first few seconds, like ink, then turned dark red before finally clearing. I gagged when I saw it. I ran it for several minutes, but it wouldn't fully clear. The color faded, but the smell didn't. It was like something rotting in metal. I didn't shower that night. I was too tired to complain to the front desk. Besides, I figured everyone else had the same problem. I started sleeping less. I'd lie in bed and hear noises from the hallway. Not voices, just shuffling. Footsteps that didn't sound like walking, like dragging. Every time I got up to check, the hallway was empty. Once I saw the elevator door close just as I opened my door, even though I hadn't heard it arrive. I leaned over the railing and looked down the stairwell, but I didn't see anyone. It wasn't fear I felt. It was discomfort. Deep, sticky discomfort that made it hard to eat, hard to sleep, hard to breathe. Then came the news. On the morning of my 6th day, I came downstairs to find police officers in the lobby. Some were talking to staff, others to guests. I tried to ask what was going on, but they waved me off. One cop asked if I'd noticed anything unusual with the water. I said yes. Bad pressure, weird color, awful smell. He wrote it down and asked which room I was in. I told him, and he nodded without explanation. The front desk clerk told me there was a problem with the water tanks on the roof. They were sending people up to investigate. I asked if that's what caused the smell. He just said, "We think so." I went back upstairs and tried not to think about it. But then they shut off the water completely. I couldn't even wash my hands. So I left the hotel that afternoon and wandered the city for hours. I ended up sitting in a McDonald's near Skid Row, nursing a soda for 3 hours just so I didn't have to go back. When I returned that evening, the hotel was full of news vans. Reporters were interviewing guests outside. I slipped through the side entrance and went up to my room. As I passed the front desk, I overheard someone say they found her in the tank. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in bed with my back against the wall, watching the door. The hallway was louder than usual. People moving around, some crying, others pacing. Around 3 in the morning, I heard the elevator again, but I hadn't heard anyone press the button. I opened my door and looked out. No one, just the sound of the elevator doors creaking open and shut over and over again, like they were stuck. The next morning, I checked out early. I didn't ask questions. I didn't complain about the refund. I just left. Outside, a reporter stopped me and asked if I'd stayed in the hotel. I nodded. He asked if I'd noticed anything strange. I told him the water. That's all. It wasn't until I got home that I found out the full story. Her name was Elisa Lamb, 21 years old, a Canadian student traveling alone. She'd been missing for weeks. The hotel released a security tape from the elevator. It was all over the news. I watched it once. Just once. It showed her acting strange, like she was talking to someone who wasn't there, pushing all the elevator buttons, stepping in and out, hiding in the corner. The elevator doors stayed open the entire time. That same weird delay I'd experienced. She was last seen alive in that video. They found her body in one of the rooftop water tanks. That's what we had been drinking, bathing in, brushing our teeth with. The explanation the police gave didn't answer much. They said there was no evidence of foul play. They ruled it accidental drowning. Said she climbed into the tank herself. No signs of struggle, no drugs, no injuries. But that didn't make sense. The tanks were hard to get to. The roof was locked. The tanks had heavy lids. No ladder inside. I read that firefighters had to cut the tank open just to get her out. So how did she get in there by herself? I remember seeing the door to the stairs by the end of my hallway. It had an alarm on it. A sign said it was for emergency exit only. I never saw anyone use it, but I thought about it later. If she'd somehow gotten through that door and climbed to the roof, she would have had to scale a platform and lift a heavy metal lid. Then what? Just slipped in and drowned? It didn't feel right. I read online that people had theories. Some said she had a psychotic episode. Others said she was on something the toxicology report missed. Some even claimed she was being chased. But no one had answers. Just that footage, grainy, silent, strange. The weeks after, I kept thinking about things. The elevator delay, the watercolor, the smell, the heavy feeling in the room. I didn't believe in ghosts. Still don't. But something was wrong in that place. Something deeply wrong. The worst part wasn't realizing I'd been using that water. It wasn't even the idea of her floating in that tank above me. It was knowing she was there the entire time I stayed. Those tanks were huge, sealed, isolated. No one thought to check them until the water got so bad people complained. And even then it took days. I kept wondering if she was alive when I checked in. Maybe even the day after. That's what stuck with me. After I left LA, I never stayed in a hotel above the 5th floor again. I always checked the water before using it. I never ignored weird smells, weird sounds, or weird feelings in a room. Because the truth is, the world doesn't need monsters or ghosts to be terrifying. Sometimes the most horrifying things are the ones that make no sense. Things that happen in real buildings, with real people, where no one can explain what went wrong. Elisa Lam's death was real. I slept 10 floors below her body. I drank from the same pipes that fed the tank she floated in. And to this day, no one can tell me how she got up there. Not really. I don't think about her every day. But when I do, it's always the same thought. She didn't belong in that tank. And something put her there. I went to Bulgaria in late June. I was 28, healthy, fit, and needed a break from work. I was working in Hamburg, long hours, little sunlight. A friend had told me that the Black Sea coast was beautiful in summer, and cheap too. So I booked a one-way ticket, packed light, and told my mom I'd be back before the end of July. The flight was smooth. I landed in Varna, then took a bus to Golden Sands. The beach was packed with tourists, most of them German or British. The weather was warm. I spent the first few days drinking beer, swimming, and eating grilled meats from little street vendors. I kept mostly to myself, but I wasn't unfriendly. I talked to people when they talked to me. I kept in touch with my mom every day. Just short texts, mostly to let her know I was okay. Around day 4, something happened. I was out at a bar near the beach. I didn't even drink that much, just a couple beers. There were some guys there, locals I think, and one of them bumped into me. I don't even remember what started it, but it got physical. One of them hit me in the side of the head, right near my left ear. It rang for a while after, sharp and painful, but I didn't black out or anything. The fight didn't last long. Security dragged us all outside. The next morning, I noticed something strange. My ears still hurt, and now I was hearing this dull pressure inside my skull, like being underwater. My balance fell a little off too. I didn't think too much of it. I figured I'd go to a doctor if it didn't get better in a few days. But that day, I also started getting a weird feeling. Not just in my head, like someone was watching me, following me. I thought maybe it was paranoia, maybe I was just shaken up from the fight. But it didn't go away. At restaurants, I kept looking behind me. On the beach, I'd scan the people around. I didn't recognize anyone, but that didn't help. I just felt unsafe, uneasy. By the next day, the pressure in my ear had gotten worse. I went to a local clinic. The doctor didn't speak much English or German, but I understood that he thought it was a rupture in the eardrum. He prescribed me antibiotics and told me to avoid flying for a few days. I didn't want to stay longer. I felt like I was being followed. That's when I texted my mom. They won't let me leave. I'm being followed. I didn't explain. I just wanted her to know something was wrong. But I didn't want to scare her too much either. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing noises in the hallway outside my room. Footsteps, a door closing down the hall. I stayed quiet and listened. I didn't see anyone when I peeked out the peephole, The pressure in my head made it hard to focus. Everything felt muffled. I kept my backpack close by, shoes next to the bed, just in case I had to leave fast. The next morning, I booked a flight back home for that afternoon. I didn't care about the doctor's advice. I needed to get out of Bulgaria. I packed up quickly and left for the airport early. At the Varna airport, things got worse. I checked in my bag, went through security. I tried to stay calm, but I felt like everyone was staring at me. At the gate, I kept seeing a man standing nearby, looking at his phone but glancing at me often. I moved to a different seat. 10 minutes later, I saw him again, closer this time. That's when I left. I don't even know what pushed me over the edge, but I got up and walked away fast. Not toward the exit, toward the side of the airport, then out a fire door. The alarm didn't even go off. I left my luggage, everything. I just started running. Outside the airport, there were fields and woods beyond the fence. I climbed it, scraped my leg doing it, but didn't stop. I kept running into the trees. It was hot, and I was sweating, but my body was running on panic. I didn't know what I was running from. That made it worse. I had my phone, but the signal kept dropping. I tried calling my mom, no connection. I turned it off to save battery. I thought I'd just get to a road, flag down a car. But the woods were deeper than I expected. After an hour, I was completely lost. I stopped to catch my breath and listened. Nothing, just birds and wind, but the silence felt fake, like something was holding its breath nearby. I sat against a tree, heart racing. I thought maybe I had a concussion. Maybe my ear injury was messing with my brain. I hadn't eaten anything since morning. As evening came, the lights started to fade. I walked in what I thought was a straight line, looking for a path or a road. But all I found were more trees. At some point, I realized I was going in circles. I found the same bent tree I'd passed before. I cursed out loud, threw a rock at it, then sat down again. I hadn't seen a single person. No cabins, no roads, no signs. That night was cold. I had no jacket, no food. I curled up in the leaves, trying to sleep, but I kept jerking awake to every sound. Twigs cracking, something brushing against a branch. My mind ran wild with possibilities. Wild animals, people following me, hallucinations. I kept telling myself I just needed to wait for morning, then walk toward the rising sun. When morning came, I started walking again. I was thirsty now, my mouth dry, tongue heavy. I followed a slope downward, hoping it would lead to a stream. Around midday, I found water, slow, dirty water in a shallow creek. I drank it anyway. It tasted like mud, but I didn't care. I splashed some on my face and kept moving. I felt like I was being watched again. That same feeling from before. Not noise, just pressure. I found a clearing later that day. Someone had built a kind of makeshift shelter, just sticks and a tarp. I thought maybe someone was living out here. I approached carefully, but it was empty. Old cans were stacked in a corner. The ground was disturbed like someone had been there, but not recently. I didn't feel safe staying there. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, like someone had stepped out and would return any second. That night, I had a fever. I was shivering but sweating. My ear throbbed so bad I couldn't lie on that side. My vision blurred when I stood. I threw up twice, though I had nothing in me. The next day was worse. I could barely walk straight. I started seeing things that weren't there. I saw a road, once a perfect strip of asphalt, but when I ran to it, it vanished. Just more trees. I heard my name whispered behind me. I turned, nothing there. I don't know how long I was out there. Time stopped making sense. I counted 2 more nights. I stopped drinking the water after the fever got worse. My lips cracked, my stomach twisted in pain. I wanted to call my mom again, but the phone was dead. I tried turning it on once, it blinked, then shut off. I cried then. Not loud, just a quiet sob while I sat in the dirt, legs folded under me. I couldn't even think straight. Eventually, I stopped walking. I stayed in one spot, too weak to move. I heard a plane once, far above. I waved my arms, though I knew it wouldn't matter. I wrote my name in the dirt with a stick. Laos. Then Germany. Then help. I laid next to it and waited. That was my last real memory. After that, it's all dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious. But when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the woods. I was in a hospital, not in Bulgaria, back in Germany. A nurse was checking my 4. I couldn't talk. My throat felt like sandpaper. I was too weak to lift my arms. But I heard her speak German. I started crying right there. It took days before I could talk properly. My mom came. She'd flown out as soon as the authorities called her. A Bulgarian farmer had found me on the edge of his property, barely alive. I'd been missing for nearly 6 days. I lost almost 10 kilos. My left eardrum had ruptured completely, and I developed a severe inner ear infection that spread. The hallucinations, the fear, the confusion, it was all part of it. A combination of fever, infection, dehydration, and panic. There was no stalker, no secret group following me, no men at the airport trying to stop me. The man I saw probably wasn't even looking at me. My brain had created it all. The pressure in my head, the imbalance, the paranoia, it built until I couldn't separate real from imagined. I ran into the woods not because someone chased me, but because I thought someone was going to. And out there, I nearly died for it. It took weeks to recover. Months, really. Even now, I have hearing loss in my left ear. I get dizzy sometimes when I stand too fast. But the worst of it, the part that still wakes me up some nights, is how real it all felt. How deeply convinced I was that I was being hunted. How quickly I lost touch with the world I knew. I don't travel alone anymore. I don't go anywhere without checking where the nearest hospital is. And I haven't touched alcohol since. People still ask me what happened in Bulgaria. Most think I was attacked or kidnapped. I don't correct them. The truth is worse in a way. I lost myself out there, not to someone else, but to my own mind. And if that farmer hadn't found me when he did, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. I live alone in a small city just outside of Fukuoka, Japan. My apartment is a 1-bedroom unit on the top floor of a 3-story building. It's nothing fancy, just a narrow hallway that leads to a small kitchen, then a short step down into the main room with a sliding door to the balcony. I work at a local logistics warehouse, long shifts from early morning to evening. Most nights I come home exhausted, eat something simple, shower, then fall into bed. It's a quiet life. I like quiet. That's why I chose to live alone. About 6 months ago, I started noticing little things that felt off. At first, it was small, nothing big enough to be sure of. A carton of milk I thought was more full. A missing banana. A cup in the drying rack that I hadn't used in days. I figured maybe I just forgot. I chalked it up to being tired, not paying attention, maybe even misremembering. It wasn't often. Once or twice a week, something would seem different than I remembered it. I told myself I was just being paranoid, but it kept happening. One morning I opened the fridge and saw a rice ball wrapper I didn't recognize. It was the convenience store kind, from Lawson. I hadn't bought it. I always get my lunch from the company cafeteria. I tossed it out, but it stuck in my mind. A few days later, I noticed the toilet seat was up. I always put it down after using it. Always. I grew up with sisters, so it's a habit. That time, I stared at it for a full minute, just standing in the bathroom, trying to figure it out. Still, I said nothing to anyone. I didn't want to sound crazy. I started locking my bedroom door at night, just to be safe. I know how that sounds, like a man afraid in his own home. But I couldn't help it. Something about the way things felt every time I came home, like the air was slightly warmer than it should be, or like the light was just a little off from how I'd left it. I wasn't sleeping well. I kept dreaming that I was being watched. Not harmed, just watched. Then one weekend, I stayed home the entire time. 2 full days and nothing happened. Nothing was out of place. Everything stayed exactly how I left it. That was the first time I really started to believe that maybe someone was getting in when I was gone. The locks weren't broken. The windows were secure. I started checking every possible entry point. Nothing showed signs of forced access. I even thought maybe someone had made a copy of my key, but I couldn't think of how. I don't lose things. I'd never had a break-in. That's when I decided to buy a small hidden camera. I ordered it online, one of those tiny ones with night vision and motion detection. It looked like a USB charger, but it had a lens built into the front. I plugged it in near the microwave, facing the kitchen and the hallway that led to the main room. I told myself I was just doing it to feel better, just to prove that nothing weird was happening, that I was being irrational. But deep down, I knew I was expecting to see something. I set the camera up on a Thursday evening before bed. I didn't check the footage until Saturday night. I don't know why I waited. Part of me was afraid of what I might find. But that night, after dinner, I sat down at my desk and connected the camera to my laptop. It had recorded 3 days worth of clips, triggered only by motion. Most of them were just me walking around in the morning or coming home from work. I fast-forwarded through them, and I saw something that made me stop. It was from Friday, around 2:18 a.m. The clip started with a long stretch of darkness. Then movement. From the top of the frame, a square outline appeared, a shadow in the ceiling. I stared, confused, until I realized what it was. The attic hatch. I never used it. It was one of those small square doors in the ceiling with a recessed handle you could pull down. I'd only looked up at it once when I first moved in. It led to a crawl space, maybe big enough to store a suitcase or two. I didn't even own a ladder tall enough to reach it, but in the footage I saw it open. Slowly, then a leg came down, a woman's leg, barefoot. She moved so carefully, like she'd done it 100 times. She climbed down, landing softly in the hallway. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt and loose pants. Her hair was tied back. She walked straight to the kitchen, like she belonged there. She opened the fridge, took out a carton of juice, and drank straight from it. Then she opened the cabinet and pulled out a bag of chips. She walked into the main room, sat on the floor, and turned on the TV. The volume was low, but she settled in like it was her home. She watched for about 20 minutes. Then she got up, went back to the kitchen, cleaned up after herself. She even wiped down the counter and climbed back into the ceiling. I watched the clip 3 times. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. My mouth had gone dry. I was breathing like I just run somewhere. I had a stranger living in my ceiling. For a while, I just sat there. I didn't move. I couldn't even close the laptop. I kept looking at her face, trying to remember if I'd ever seen her before. I hadn't. Not in the building, not in the neighborhood. I didn't know who she was or how long she'd been there. I clicked through more clips. She came down again the next night, Friday, around the same time. Did the same things. Ate quietly. Watched a bit of TV, then disappeared into the ceiling again. It was like she'd made a routine of it. I didn't sleep that night. I turned every light on in the apartment and sat on the couch with a kitchen knife in my hand, staring up at the ceiling hatch. Every sound made me jump. I kept imagining what would happen if she came down and saw me awake. At 2:14 a.m., I heard the faintest creak above me. I held my breath. Then nothing. Just silence. I stayed up until sunrise. When the light finally came through the balcony window, I started shaking. I couldn't stay there. I left and went to a nearby manga cafe and stayed there for the whole day. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? What would I even say? I decided to go to the building manager first. His office was on the first floor. I told him I thought someone had gotten into my apartment. He looked surprised. He said no one else had a key. I didn't tell him about the footage. I just asked if there was any way someone could access the attic space. He said the attic in each unit wasn't connected. It was sealed off per apartment, but the roof had a small access door for maintenance workers. He agreed to come up with me and check it out. When we got to my apartment, I unlocked the door and let him in. I pointed at the hatch. He looked up, then got a stepladder from the utility closet in the hallway. He pushed open the hatch and looked inside with a flashlight. Then he froze. He called out quietly, asking me to hand him his phone. I did. He whispered something into it, probably calling the police. Then he climbed up. I heard movement, a rustle, something shifting. He came down with his face pale and tight. "She's up there," he said. The police came about 20 minutes later. They didn't go in right away. 2 officers waited below while another one climbed up. I stayed outside, pacing on the walkway outside my door. They brought her down in handcuffs. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She looked small, calm, almost tired. Her clothes were dirty. Her eyes were sunken. She looked like someone who had lived in the dark for a long time. They found a sleeping bag, a few small bags of food, some water bottles, and a plastic box where she had stored wrappers and waste. She had been up there for at least 2 months, maybe longer. She hadn't brought much with her. No electronics, nothing personal except a photo of an old man in a hospital bed. That was the only clue. Later, I found out that she had once lived in the same building, years ago. Her father had passed away, and she had no job, no income. She'd been evicted. She came back one night, found the attic door unlocked on the roof, and started living there in secret. She moved from unit to unit whenever one was empty or being renovated. When I moved in, she must have decided to stay hidden. The cops said it wasn't the first time something like that had happened. In dense cities with tight housing and limited security, some people found ways to slip between the cracks. People desperate enough to live unnoticed. They charged her with trespassing, theft, and unlawful entry. She didn't deny anything. She just said she had nowhere else to go. I changed apartments after that. I didn't want to stay there another night. I kept the camera footage for a while, but eventually deleted it. I couldn't bring myself to watch it again. For weeks afterward, I kept looking up at ceilings, in stores, in stairwells, in friends' homes. I kept thinking about how easy it had been for her, how quiet she'd been, how she'd lived just feet above me, night after night. I don't live on the top floor anymore. And now, every time I move into a new place, the first thing I do is check the attic. Every corner, every vent, every inch of ceiling space. Because I know now, for sure, that sometimes we're not as alone as we think. I matched with him on a Wednesday night. I remember because I had just come back from a long shift at the office and didn't feel like doing anything except curling up on the couch and scrolling through dating apps. His profile showed up after maybe 5 or 6 swipes. He looked decent, not movie star attractive, but clean and put together. His name said Daniel. He worked in finance, and he lived just a couple of neighborhoods over from me. He had a few photos, one in front of a lake, one at a coffee shop, one in a suit with a drink in his hand. His smile was relaxed, not forced. His bio said he liked hiking, reading true crime books, and cooking. It all sounded safe, normal, maybe even a little boring, which was exactly what I wanted at that point in my life. I'd dated enough emotionally unavailable guys and loud party types. I just wanted someone who would show up when they said they would. I swiped right, and within minutes we matched. He messaged me first, something simple like, "Hey, how's your week going?" The conversation felt natural. Not too intense, not flirty in a gross way. Just back and forth, small talk. He told me he'd grown up in the area, went to school up north, came back to be closer to family. I told him about my job in marketing, about my new apartment, about how I spent my weekends mostly reading or baking or going on walks alone. He seemed genuinely interested in the small things, like the kind of books I liked or how I made my coffee in the morning. Over the next few days, we kept talking. Every morning, there'd be a good morning message. Every night, a sleep well. It felt stable. We didn't jump into anything too fast. We took our time. After about a week of texting, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee that Saturday. Not dinner, not drinks, just coffee at a quiet place in the late morning. We met at a small cafe tucked into a corner of a tree-lined street. It was warm that day, sunny, but not too hot. I got there early, sat by the window, and waited. He walked in wearing jeans and a light gray t-shirt, sunglasses on his head. In person, he looked a little older than his photos, maybe by 2 or 3 years, but still him. We hugged awkwardly and sat down. He ordered an iced latte, I got a cappuccino, and we talked for about an hour. I remember how calm he seemed. He didn't fidget or ramble. He listened. He asked questions. He had that kind of voice you could play in the background while falling asleep. Not dull, just soft. He said he had a sister who lived in Oregon, a mom in assisted living, a dog that had passed last year. All of it made sense. Nothing sounded weird or off. We left after an hour and walked a bit through the neighborhood. At one point, we passed a bookstore and he asked if I wanted to go in. We browsed for a while. He picked up a copy of a crime novel I'd read recently and asked if it was good. I said yes, and he bought it. That stuck with me for some reason. It felt thoughtful. After that, we texted less often but still regularly. He said he was going on a work trip the following week, some conference in Dallas, and wouldn't be as available. That week, he checked in a couple of times, sent a photo from his hotel room, a blurry pic of the skyline. Nothing romantic, just updates. Then, slowly, the messages stopped. I sent him a few. Nothing needy, just, "Hey, how's the trip?" Or, "Hope your week's going okay." No response. I gave a few days. Still nothing. I figured he'd lost interest. It wasn't the first time that it happened to me, and probably not the last. It didn't hurt much. Mostly just confused me. After a week, I tried to look him up again on the app. His profile was gone, deleted or unmatched. I checked Instagram using his first name and the company he'd told me he worked at. Nothing came up. Not a single photo, not a LinkedIn profile, nothing. That's when I started to feel weird. Not scared, not yet, just unsettled. I sat at my desk one night after work and opened my laptop. I Googled his full name, Daniel H., the last name he'd given me. No results matched his face. I tried image search. Still nothing. I looked up the company he said he worked at. I checked their staff directory. No one with that name. I told myself maybe he used a fake name on the app. People do that, I guess. Maybe he didn't want co-workers to find him. Maybe he had a bad breakup and didn't want an ex snooping. 100 reasons. But a part of me didn't buy it. About a month passed. I stopped thinking about it as much. Life went on: work, errands, laundry bills. The usual rhythm of boring adulthood. Then, one Friday night, I was folding laundry on the couch with the TV playing in the background. The local news was on. I wasn't really paying attention until I heard the words dating app and murder. I looked up. They were showing a photo of a man. My stomach flipped. It was him. Same face, same haircut, same casual smile. But the name on the screen was different. Completely different. First and last. The news anchor said his real name was Patrick something. I didn't even hear the last name because my ears were ringing. He'd been arrested that morning in connection with the murder of a woman in another city, not far from here. They met on a dating app. He'd used a fake name. She'd invited him over to her place. Neighbors reported hearing yelling, then nothing. Her body was found 2 days later. Strangled. No signs of forced entry. Nobody. Just dead. I dropped the laundry and sat frozen for a while. I couldn't move. I replayed everything in my head: his voice, the way he sat across from me, how he held his cup with both hands, how he looked down when he laughed. All of it came back like a flood. And I kept thinking, what if he'd picked me instead? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next night either. I went back through all our texts, all our messages, every photo he sent. I took screenshots. I wrote down every detail I could remember. What time we met, what he wore, what he said about his job, his family, the book he bought. On Monday morning, I called the police. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just said the truth. I had met him. He used a fake name. We went out once. He ghosted me. I'd seen him on the news. They transferred me to a detective. He asked me a lot of questions: how we met, where, what he said, if he ever came to my place. I told him everything. The detective didn't say much in return. Just took notes, thanked me, and said some of my follow-up. For the next few weeks, I kept checking the news. More information came out. They found photos of at least 3 other women on his phone. Some of them were recent. Some had vanished years ago. They didn't say how many, but they hinted it might be more than 4. I wasn't one of them. I kept telling myself that. I wasn't one of them. I changed the locks on my apartment. I stopped going to that cafe. I deleted all my dating apps. I told my friends, told my sister, even told my boss in case I needed time off. Some of them hugged me. Some just stared. Nobody knew what to say. What do you say to someone who had coffee with a killer? One night, about 2 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't know. I let go to voicemail. It was the detective. He said they'd confirmed my story, that my information had helped fill in some blanks. They found a receipt from the bookstore where he bought the crime novel. The time matched exactly with the day I said we met. They thanked me. That was it. In the months after, I started seeing a therapist. I had nightmares. Not about him chasing me or killing me, just normal moments. Sitting across from him at the table, walking past the bookstore, watching him pick up that book. It wasn't the violence that haunted me. It was how ordinary it all felt. How calm. How nothing felt wrong until it was too late. I never understood how people could fall for con men or serial killers. I used to think, how could you not know? But now I do. Because they don't come with warning signs. They don't come with music or red lights or glowing eyes. They come with small talk and coffee dates and soft voices. They come with fake names and quiet smiles. I'm careful now, not just with dating, with everything. I watch people more closely. I listen harder. I pay attention to the details, the things they say, the things they don't. I don't meet strangers alone. I don't let anyone walk me home unless I know them. I lock my doors twice, and sometimes when I pass by that bookstore, I think about that book he bought. I wonder if he ever read it, if he finished it, if he saw anything of himself in it. I haven't dated anyone since. I don't know if I will. Maybe someday, maybe never, but I'm still here. I'm still alive, and that's more than I can say for her. I was 18 and restless when I left home for good. I didn't have much with me. Just a canvas backpack stuffed with some clothes, a toothbrush, my wallet with $63 in it, and a frayed map that I folded and unfolded more than I used. I wasn't running from anything dramatic. No abuse, no huge fight with my parents. I just didn't want to stay in a small town where every face knew mine and every day looked like the one before. I wanted something bigger, something different. I figured I'd hitchhike across the country and see where I landed. By the time I hit the outskirts of Oklahoma City, I was sunburned, tired, and hadn't eaten anything except gas station snacks in 2 days. I've been picked up by all kinds of people so far. An old man in a rusted sedan who chain-smoked the whole ride, a nervous college kid who drove like the brakes didn't work, even a couple who made me sit in the back with their dog. But no one had felt dangerous, just weird or tired or curious. It was early evening when I first saw the truck. It was parked on the shoulder of a long stretch of highway, hazards blinking like it was waiting. The cab was long and silver, with a red stripe running down the side. The trailer was one of those boxy ones. Nothing fancy, just plain white. A guy was leaning against the grill, arms folded like he had all the time in the world. He saw me walking and waved. I hesitated. Something about the way he smiled didn't feel right. It wasn't big or friendly, just small, tight, like he was trying to keep something behind his teeth. But I was hungry, and it was getting dark, and the sun was bleeding out across the asphalt like someone had slashed the sky open. So I waved back and walked up. He didn't ask many questions, just said he was heading toward Texas, that he could take me as far as Dallas. His voice was slow dry, not exactly friendly, but not aggressive either. Just flat. He looked to be in his 40s, clean shaven, dark hair with gray at the temples. The lines on his face looked permanent, carved in by long hours and long roads. He wore jeans, a tucked-in flannel, and a belt with a big silver buckle. He had on scuffed cowboy boots. I climbed in. The inside of the cab smelled like old coffee, plastic, and something I couldn't place, faint metallic. The seat was cracked and sticky. A small cooler sat between us. The dash was cluttered with candy wrappers, crumpled receipts, and a cracked Polaroid of a woman whose smile didn't reach her eyes. He introduced himself as Bob. Not Robert, just Bob. The ride started normal enough. He didn't talk much. He didn't play music either. Just the sound of the tires humming along the highway and the occasional rattle from somewhere in the back. I asked him once what was in the trailer, and he said tools. Just tools. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the dark came fast. Bob flicked on the cab lights, and everything inside glowed a weak yellow. I noticed then that the doors didn't have handles on the inside, just smooth metal where they should have been. I didn't say anything. We stopped at a small truck stop around midnight. It was one of those places that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Dim lights, sticky floors, a few dusty racks of snacks, and a couple of vending machines that half worked. I told Bob I was going to grab a sandwich and use the bathroom. He nodded and handed me a $10 bill. Said he'd wait. In the bathroom, I stood in front of the sink and stared at my face in the mirror. My eyes looked sunken. My skin looked dull. My lips were cracked. I thought about calling someone, but I didn't have anyone to call. Not really. I splashed cold water on my face and went back out. Bob was at the counter buying a coffee. He saw me and smiled again. That tight lip stretch, and we walked back to the truck. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cab had a sleeper bunk in the back, and Bob told me I could use it while he drove. I climbed in, pulled a blanket over myself, and pretended to drift off. But I didn't. I just stared at the ceiling, listening. He talked to himself when he thought I was asleep. Not full conversations, just phrases, bits and pieces, words like obedient and clean up and deserved it. Sometimes he laughed, but it was quiet and forced, like he was trying to push it out. Around 2 a.m., we pulled off the main road. I felt the shift in speed, the tilt of the truck as it turned off the highway onto some gravel path. I sat up slowly and looked out the curtain. We were heading down a narrow, tree-lined road. No lights, no signs. I asked where we were going. He didn't answer. The truck stopped, and he got out. I waited. Then the passenger door opened from the outside, and he motioned for me to get out. Said he needed help with something in the back. He had a flashlight in one hand, and the other was resting on his belt. I got out. The night was heavy, quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. The flashlight beam danced over dirt and grass and trees that looked like they were leaning in to listen. He walked to the back of the trailer and unlocked it. Inside, it wasn't full of tools. It was a room, or something like a room. The walls were lined with padding, old, dirty padding like you'd see in a gym or a mental hospital. There was a chair in the middle. Not just any chair. This one had metal cuffs on the arms and legs. A small table beside it held things I didn't want to name. Pliers, clamps, a knife with a blackened handle. He looked at me and said, "Get in." I didn't move. He stepped toward me. I ran. I didn't think, I just turned and ran into the trees. The flashlight beam swung wildly behind me, then the sound of heavy boots crunching leaves. He didn't yell. He didn't say a word, just chased. I tripped, fell, got back up. My lungs felt like they were filling with ash. My legs burned. My hands bled from grabbing at branches. I don't know how long I ran. Long enough that the sound of his steps faded. Long enough that I couldn't hear anything but my own heart pounding and the blood rushing in my ears. Eventually, I collapsed behind a fallen tree and didn't move. The woods were cold. I didn't sleep, not really. I just shivered and listened and waited for light. When morning came, I found a road. A real road. A two-lane strip of asphalt with faded lines and a ditch on either side. I walked for hours until I saw a gas station. A big one. With people. I told the clerk everything. Or most of it. Enough to make her call the police. They didn't believe me at first. They thought I was making it up or had been hallucinating. But when they finally drove out to the woods, they found the truck. It was empty. No sign of Bob. But the trailer matched what I described. The chair. The cuffs. The tools. There was even blood, dried and dark, on the padding and floor. They put out an alert. Said his real name was Robert Ben Rhodes. That he'd been wanted before. That there were bodies. Girls. Some still missing. That he'd been driving cross-country for years. Picking up hitchhikers, travelers, people like me. They caught him a few weeks later during a routine traffic stop. The trooper pulled him over for a broken taillight. Found a girl in the back. Chained. Barely alive. She told them everything. They arrested him. He confessed to more than I wanted to know. He's in prison now. Life sentence. No parole. People still ask me if I ever healed from it. I don't know what to say. I still see his face in my sleep sometimes. That tight smile. That cap. That trailer. I don't hitchhike anymore. I don't sleep with my back to the door. I don't trust quiet men. I moved on, sort of. I live in a small apartment in a city where people don't look at each other. I have a job that keeps my hands busy and my head quiet. I keep the lights on at night. I carry a knife in my boot. Sometimes when I hear a big rig pass outside, I freeze. But I'm alive, and I never got in another truck again. I booked the hotel online a week before flying out. It was my first time in Las Vegas. I wasn't there to party or gamble, just needed a break. Work had been a mess lately. My apartment lease was ending. My sister and I weren't talking. Everything felt heavy. I just needed quiet, a clean room, a bed to lie on, some hours away from my life. The place I picked wasn't fancy. Not one of those high-rise casinos with rooftop pools or flashing signs. It was a mid-range hotel a little off the main strip. Affordable, decent reviews. Pictures looked clean enough. Simple white bedding, neutral colored carpet, and a small kitchenette. That was enough for me. I landed late. My flight was delayed twice, and my phone battery was at 2% when I finally got my luggage. By the time I got to the hotel, I was exhausted. The lobby was small, quiet. A woman at the desk handed me my key card. I don't remember her face. I just remember how quiet it all felt. The carpeted hallway muffled every footstep. Room 325. I remember the number because I had to try the card 3 times before the green light blinked. I stepped in. The room was warm. Too warm. I dropped my bag by the door and went straight for the air conditioner, twisting the dial until the unit buzzed to life. The hum of cold air filled the space. I didn't notice the smell right away. Jet lag and exhaustion can dull your senses. All I really cared about was showering and sleeping. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling mindlessly on my phone until it finally died in my hand. The room wasn't awful, just worn. Slight stain on the carpet near the door. Chips in the paint. The kind of small damage hotels stop noticing after a while. Still, the sheets looked clean, the bathroom was stocked, and I was too tired to care. I took a long, hot shower, climbed into bed. I didn't even set an alarm. That first night, I slept like a rock, out cold for hours. When I woke up the next morning, I noticed it. A faint, sour odor, like something left in the sun too long. Not strong, just there, lingering. I figured it was the air conditioner at first, or maybe the drain in the bathroom. I opened the small window, aired out the space, then left for the day. I didn't do much, just wandered around the city, saw some of the big hotels, ate at a diner. By evening, I was back in bed with takeout and a bottle of water. That smell was still there. A little worse now. The room didn't feel fresh. It felt used, like someone else's leftovers were in the air. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I tossed and turned. The pillows smelled faintly of the same thing. Something rotten, but not strong enough to make sense. I try not to think about it. The next morning, the smell was stronger. Thick. It had weight now. I could feel in my throat. I opened the window again, turned the AC off, lit a cheap lavender candle I'd picked up at a drugstore. Still, it hung in the air like a curtain I couldn't pull back. I went down to the front desk, mentioned the smell. The woman there barely looked up from her screen. Said housekeeping would check it out. That evening when I returned, the room was tidier. The trash had been taken out. Fresh towels folded on the rack. But the smell was still there. Stronger somehow. By then it had shifted. No longer just sour. It was musky. Vet. Like spoiled meat left in plastic. I stood in the center of the room and tried to find the source. I opened the fridge. Empty. Sniffed the trash. Clean. Pulled back the curtains. Nothing. I got down on my knees and sniffed near the bathroom door. The smell was strongest near the bed. I lifted the mattress and checked the sheets. Clean. I got on my knees again and looked under the bed. It was dark. I couldn't see anything. I don't know why I didn't look closer that night. Maybe because part of me didn't want to find anything. I convinced myself it was a plumbing issue. Maybe mold in the carpet or something rotting behind the wall. The third night was the worst. I hardly slept. I woke up every hour. The smell was thick, almost sweet now. The kind of scent that coats the inside of your nose. I wrapped my hoodie around my head. I even tried sleeping in the armchair by the window. Nothing helped. The next morning, I went downstairs again. I was more insistent this time. Told them the room smelled terrible and I couldn't sleep in it anymore. I asked for a different room. The man at the desk, different from the woman before, just nodded slowly and said they'd get housekeeping to check again. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. I went for another long walk. That afternoon, when I came back, the room door was propped open. 2 housekeeping staff were inside. One of them had pulled the bed frame out from the wall. I stood in the doorway. They didn't see me right away. Then one of them said something in Spanish, loud, urgent. The other turned sharply and stepped back, hand covering his mouth. I stepped into the room just as one of them looked up at me. His face had gone pale. He told me to wait outside. I stood in the hallway. I didn't move. Within minutes, there were voices. Radios. The manager showed up, a tall man in a black polo shirt. He walked right past me. Then the hotel security guard. Then 2 officers. I stood frozen, arms crossed, while they all filed in and out of the room. They didn't let me back inside. A woman from the front desk came up with a key card and led me to a different room down the hall. Room 337. I still remember it. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to. My hands were shaking as I rolled my suitcase down the hallway. Inside the new room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. I don't remember how long. Later that evening, an officer knocked on the door. She asked to speak with me. She told me, very simply, that a body had been found under the bed in room 325. A man, likely there for several days, maybe longer. Decomposition had started. That's what the smell was. She asked me questions when I checked in, what I noticed, if I had seen anything unusual. I answered as best I could, but I didn't know anything. I hadn't seen anyone. I'd been in that room for 3 nights. 3 nights sleeping over a corpse. That realization didn't hit me all at once. It sank in slowly, like cold water rising around your ankles. The more I thought about it, the worse it felt. I had eaten in that room, brushed my teeth, watched TV, slept. And underneath me, directly beneath the mattress, a dead man had been rotting. The officer said it looked like the body had been stuffed into the box frame, between the wooden slats and the floor. That's why no one noticed right away. There was no blood, just the smell. The staff had ignored it. I had ignored it too for a while. They didn't tell me who he was. I asked, and the officer just said it was an open investigation. Later I learned more, not from the police, but from news articles. The story hit local outlets within days. He was a man in his late 30s. No ID, no known address. Hotel staff claimed they had no record of him checking in. No surveillance footage of him entering the building. One theory was that he had been killed elsewhere and brought in through the service entrance, dragged in a laundry cart hidden during shift change. Another theory was that he had been squatting in empty rooms, hiding under the bed when staff entered. Someone caught him. No one knew for sure. The autopsy report said he'd been dead for at least 4 days before he was found. That means he was already there when I checked in. That part kept me up at night. The idea that I had walked into that room, placed my bags on the floor, laid down, and never once realized someone was lying under me dead. The police cleared me of any connection, of course. There was never any suspicion toward me, but that didn't make it easier. The hotel refunded my stay, sent a formal apology letter, offered a voucher for a free future stay, which I obviously never used. They cleaned the room, replaced the mattress, repainted the walls. A few months later, it was listed again online like nothing ever happened. But I couldn't forget it. For a long time afterward, I couldn't sleep in hotels. I tried. I'd travel for work, check into a room, sit on the edge of the bed, and feel sick. I started checking under every bed, every time, no matter how nice the hotel was. I'd get down on my knees, lift the edge of the mattress, and shine a flashlight underneath. Every time, my friends laughed when I told them, thought I was being dramatic, but I couldn't explain it in a way that made sense. You don't understand what it does to your mind, knowing you slept in the same room as death. Not near it, not next to it, on top of it, over it, for 3 whole nights. Sometimes I still dream about it. The smell comes back in waves. I'll wake up sweating, feeling it in my nose and the back of my throat. That thick, sour sweetness. Even now, years later, I don't sleep easily. I use a fan for noise. I keep a flashlight by the bed. I check the closets, check the bathroom, check under the bed. Every time. I didn't plan on driving that far. The trip was supposed to be a simple 3-hour run from my apartment to a town just over the state line. I had a job interview the next morning and figured I'd get there in the evening, check into a motel, have dinner, and rest early. Nothing complicated. I even left early, around 1 p.m., just to avoid driving after dark. Things started off normally. The highway was quiet, and the weather was clear, sunny but not hot. I had a couple energy drinks in the passenger seat, some snacks, and a podcast playing on low volume. After about 2 hours, the GPS alerted me to take an exit that would shave off about 20 minutes. I followed it without really thinking. At first, it didn't seem like anything strange. The new route took me down a narrow but paved road through what looked like farmland. Old barns, barbed wire fences, and the occasional rusted-out pickup truck sitting in the weeds. No big deal. The road twisted a lot more than I expected, and soon enough, I stopped seeing houses entirely. It was just trees on both sides, thick and dense, and the pavement started to crack in places. Still, the GPS insisted I was on the right track. It said another hour and 15 minutes to go. I was about 20 minutes into that route when I hit the first eater sign. Bright orange, blocking the road. Road closed, local traffic only. I didn't want to backtrack, and there was a handmade-looking sign underneath it that said, "Use County RD 117." I checked my phone. No signal, but the GPS still showed the map. Sure enough, County Road 117 was a small line just ahead and to the right. I figured it was fine. That was a mistake. I took the turn. The new road was gravel, then dirt, and then not even that. It was just two ruts carved through the weeds. My tires bumped and bounced. The trees pressed in close. I told myself to just keep going, that the road would open up again soon. The GPS still thought I was fine. 10 more minutes in, I passed a broken fence and what looked like a collapsed farmhouse. The roof had caved in. There was a washing machine sitting upside down on the front lawn, even though the lawn hadn't been mowed in probably a decade. I started to feel a little uneasy. Not afraid, just aware that I was somewhere I didn't belong. I kept going. Another 5 minutes. The road dipped down into a gully. The forest canopy above blocked out so much light that it felt like dusk, even though it was barely 3 p.m. I could hear something dragging under my car. Twigs, maybe. Rocks hit the undercarriage. I slowed to a crawl. The road was so narrow, I couldn't even turn around. Then the GPS said, "Signal lost." I tapped the screen. Nothing. I held my phone up. No bars. Just a spinning circle. That's when I started to worry. I drove for a while longer, maybe 15 or 20 more minutes, but it felt longer. There were no signs, no turn-offs, nothing. Just more woods and a sense of being swallowed up. I looked at my gas gauge. It was below a quarter tank. Not great, but enough to get me out, assuming I found a way out soon. Then I saw a house. It sat just off the side of the road, maybe 50 yards back. White paint peeling. 2 stories. The windows upstairs were covered in plastic sheeting. The porch sagged on one end. It looked abandoned. I slowed down, thinking I might be able to ask for help anyway. Even if no one was there, maybe I could use their land to turn around. I pulled into the clearing. The grass was high and soft. My tires left deep impressions as I eased forward. I stopped maybe 20 feet from the house and left the engine running. No movement, no cars. I got out. The air smelled off, damp and sour, like wet carpet. I walked to the porch and knocked on the door. It was wood old, the kind with vertical slats and a brass knob that didn't match. No sound from inside. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Then I noticed the door wasn't actually latched. It was closed, but the knob turned freely. I didn't go inside. Not yet. I backed up and walked around the side, thinking I'd find a driveway or maybe a mailbox, anything that would give me a clue about where I was. But there was no driveway. The ground behind the house sloped into a dense stretch of woods that looked almost black from how thick the shadows were. I turned to go back to the car and froze. Someone was standing behind it, not moving, just standing still, like they had walked up while I was around the side of the house. They were wearing a brown jacket, baggy pants, and what looked like a stocking cap. Too far to see their face clearly. I stepped forward slowly and said something, I don't even remember what. Probably something dumb like, "Hey," or "Sorry to bother you." They didn't respond, didn't move. I felt something cold crawl up the back of my neck. Not fear exactly, just the first wave of adrenaline. I took another step and raised my hand, waving. Still nothing. Then they turned. Not toward me, just a slow turn, like they were looking at the house. I backed away. I didn't run, just walked back to the driver's side and opened the door. Only then did the person look at me. Their face was off. Not wrong exactly, just vacant. No expression. Pale skin. Dark eyes that didn't seem to focus. I got in and closed the door, locking it. They took a step forward. I put the car in reverse and backed out as fast as I could without getting stuck. The tires spun a little in the soft ground, but I made it back onto the dirt track. I didn't even look back. I drove for a while, no clue how long, because I wasn't thinking clearly. My hands were shaking, and I kept glancing in the mirror. I didn't see anyone following, but I also didn't see anything familiar. The road kept winding, and the trees never let up. Then I saw another structure, this one much smaller. A shed. It was painted green, maybe to blend into the forest, though the paint was faded and flaking. I slowed down, considering stopping again, but something about it made my skin crawl. There was a metal pipe sticking out of the top, like a chimney, and some kind of plastic tarp nailed to the side like a curtain. I didn't stop. I kept driving. Eventually the road started to rise and the trees began to thin. I saw sky again, gray and overcast now. The shadows were longer. It was getting late. I was almost out of gas. Then I saw another road, paved, a T-intersection up ahead. I almost cried. I pulled onto it, not even caring which direction it led. The tires finally hummed on smooth asphalt again. I checked my phone. Still no signal, but I didn't care. The road had to lead somewhere. 10 minutes later, I saw a sign. A real one. County Route 14. Then a gas station. A rundown place with 2 pumps and an old drink machine out front. But it was open. I pulled in and filled up, then went inside. The guy behind the counter was old, maybe in his 70s. He looked surprised to see me. "You come from down that ridge road?" he asked. I nodded, too tired to explain. He shook his head slowly. Ain't many folks use that way anymore. I asked him where I was. He told me. I was over 60 miles off course. He let me use the landline to call a tow service just to check the underside of my car. And while I waited, I asked if he knew anything about that white house. The man was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Used to be an old boarding house back in the 50s. Got shut down. Code violations. Owner disappeared after some kind of investigation. Place was supposed to be demolished." I told him someone was there. He didn't say anything after that. Just looked at me for a while. I never filed a report. I couldn't even describe the man clearly. My GPS history didn't save because there was no signal. The car was fine, just some scuffs underneath. I made it to the motel near the interview hours later, around midnight. I didn't sleep much. For weeks afterward, I checked that area on Google Maps, trying to retrace my route, but I could never find that exact path again. Roads would appear and disappear depending on how far I zoomed in. The shed didn't show up. The White House was gone, but I know I was there, and someone else was too. I don't tell many people about it. When I do, they ask the same thing. Why didn't I go back? Why didn't I report it? Because I didn't want to be right. Whatever that place was, whatever that man was doing, he wasn't surprised to see me. He looked like he'd been waiting. It was the second night of our camping trip in Montana, late July. My family had picked a quiet campground near a lake, far from the highway, surrounded by pine forest on all sides. The air smelled like pine needles and damp earth. The sky was clear and filled with stars. We were one of only a few groups there, if that. I hadn't seen anyone else that whole day except my parents and my younger sister, who stayed close to the campsite reading books and roasting marshmallows. My brother and I had taken the tent farthest from the rest of the family, closer to the trees. We were both teenagers, me 17, him 15. We liked having our own space. That night, after the fire had died down and the campsite had gone quiet, I realized I needed to pee. The bathrooms were a couple 100 feet away from the site, a short trail leading to a wooden outhouse. It was the kind of bathroom you'd expect out in the woods, old 2 stalls, no lights, and just a vent pipe sticking up from the roof. I told my brother I was heading to the outhouse, and he got up and came with me. The night was cool, but not cold. The gravel path crunched under our shoes. We didn't bring flashlights, just used our phones to light the way. The forest was dark and still, nothing but the occasional chirp or rustle in the brush. When we got there, we saw that one of the stall doors was open, swung wide open, actually, and creaking slightly in the breeze. The other one was shut, locked from the inside. We paused a few feet away and both aimed our phone lights at the doors. I said nothing at first. My brother looked at me and smirked. We hadn't seen another camper all day. Every other campsite around us looked abandoned. No cars, no smoke from fires, no food left out, nothing. It was strange to think someone else might actually be using the bathroom. We both stood there, waiting awkwardly. I figured maybe someone had pulled in late and just hadn't made any noise. Still, there hadn't been any new tire tracks on the road earlier when I'd gone down to the lake. We waited a few more minutes. I used the open stall while my brother stood to the side, scrolling through his phone, but he kept glancing at the locked door. No sounds, no shifting, no breathing, no toilet paper moving. Nothing. When I came out, my brother knocked on the lock stall just once, not even hard. We waited again. No sound, no movement. After a few seconds, he muttered, "Maybe someone died in there," and laughed a little. I laughed too, but it wasn't a full laugh. It didn't feel funny. I looked down at the dirt in front of the stall. There weren't any fresh footprints, just old, smoothed over prints from people who had probably used the outhouse weeks ago. We left after that, just turned back and walked down the trail to our tent. I didn't say anything more, but the feeling stayed with me. Something about that locked door in the middle of the night in a mostly empty campground just sat wrong in my gut. I woke up early the next morning before everyone else. I usually do when I'm camping. I like walking around while the sun rises and the campground is quiet. I took the same path back toward the outhouse. This time I didn't bring my phone, just walked slowly, the dew soaking into my shoes, birds starting to chirp overhead. The light made everything softer, trees glowing gold, the path brighter, the shadows less harsh. When I got there, both stall doors were wide open. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I was even looking at the same building. But I was. Same wooden siding, same chipped green paint, same trail. Only now, both doors stood open like nothing had happened the night before. I walked up slowly. The stall that had been locked was empty. No person, but it didn't feel empty. Not really. There was a pile of trash in the corner. Wrappers, paper, some crumpled tissues. A rolled up, dirty blanket pushed against the wall. I looked closer and saw an empty orange pill bottle laying on its side under the bench. I stepped inside. No smell, no bucket, no human waste, no strong chemical cleaner. Just that trash, that blanket, and that bottle. Everything looked like it had been tucked into place with care, like someone had made a temporary home there. I stepped out again, looked around. Nothing moved. I stood there a few more seconds, then walked back toward camp. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not yet. I think I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Maybe someone had stayed the night in there. Maybe they had nowhere else to go. It felt wrong to tell my parents and make it a whole thing. I didn't want someone to get in trouble if they were just trying to get through the night. But the feeling didn't leave me. Not that day, not the next. I kept thinking about the locked door, the silence, how they must have been in there the whole time we stood outside. Not even moving, not even shifting on the seat, just still. I started noticing little things around the campground that made me uneasy. Trash moved. A backpack someone left out now looked half unzipped. My sister's shoes were outside her tent one morning, even though she swore she brought them in. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just kept watching. On the third night, my brother and I stayed up late again. We sat at the fire, just the two of us, poking the embers with sticks and not talking much. I told him I went back to the bathroom that morning, but the locked stall had been open. He raised his eyebrows, but didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he said, "Weird," and tossed a pine cone into the coals. That night, I didn't sleep well. I woke up more than once, thinking I heard someone walking near our tent. The sound of twigs breaking, something brushing against the nylon. Each time I'd sit up, hold my breath, wait. Nothing. I'd lay back down and stare at the dark ceiling of the tent. The next morning, I got up again before everyone. I walked to the outhouse one more time. The stall doors were both closed now, unlocked. I pushed one open, then the other. Nothing inside either of them. No trash, no blanket, no pill bottle. Someone had cleaned it up, or taken it with them. I looked around again. Still no new cars, no new people, just the same quiet woods, the same empty campsites, the same gravel trail. It bothered me. Whoever stayed in that outhouse had done it quietly, carefully. They didn't want to be noticed. They locked the door and didn't move while we stood outside, talking and laughing. They left in the middle of the night, or early that morning, and took everything with them. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What kind of person does that? What situation do you have to be in to sleep in a bathroom stall in the woods? Why didn't they make a sound, even when we knocked? I started watching every face I saw, even if there weren't many. One older man came by with a small trailer the day before we left. He parked near the lake, but kept to himself. He had a thin frame, gray hair, and didn't say a word to anyone. I thought about asking him if he'd been here a few days earlier, but I didn't. When we packed up and drove out on the last day, I looked back at the path that led to the outhouse. The doors were both closed again. No movement, no one around. I never got an answer about what happened. Never found out who was in that stall. Maybe they were just passing through. Maybe they were hiding. Maybe they were sick or high or scared. I don't know, but I do know that they were only a few feet away from us that night, sitting silently behind that door while we stood in the dark with our phones, laughing and talking like nothing was strange. It was the kind of thing that sticks with you. The kind of thing you remember later when you hear a bump outside your window or see a shadow move the wrong way. Not because it was dramatic or loud or bloody, but because it was real, because someone was really there, watching, listening, not wanting to be seen. And for a while, they weren't, until we left, and they moved on, just like that. Last summer, I went camping with two friends, Tom and Ben, in the Rockies. It was late July, the weather was warm during the day, a little cold at night, but nothing serious. We'd been planning the trip for months. We were all used to hiking and camping, but this time we wanted something more remote. No campsites, no marked trails, just nature. We parked our car at a ranger station, signed the logbook, and hiked out about 10 miles with our packs. It was quiet the whole way, no one else on the trail. We crossed a stream, climbed a ridge, and finally settled on a spot by a wide clearing near a bend in the creek. The trees were thick all around us, tall pines and a few aspen groves. The only sound was water and wind through the branches. No roads, no cell signal, no sign of other people. Exactly what we wanted. We set up 2 tents, Ben and I in one, Tom in the other. We cooked freeze-dried chili on the camp stove, watched the fire die down, then sat under the stars for a while. We talked about the usual stuff, work, life, dumb memories from college. It felt good. No distractions, no noise, just the 3 of us in the woods. Eventually, we turned in. The first night was calm. I remember lying in my sleeping bag, listening to the creek. Nothing else. The second day, we went exploring. Climbed a hill to get a better view. Took photos. Found animal tracks, probably elk or deer. At one point, we came across old scat that Ben said looked like it came from a black bear. It didn't bother us much. We knew how to camp clean. No food in the tent. Everything bagged and hung in a tree. We were more worried about weather than wildlife. That night, we ate early and turned in around 10. I remember waking up in the middle of the night. My phone said 3:12 a.m. I wasn't sure what had stirred me. Then I heard it. A zipper. Not loud, just that slow rear-up sound. At first, I thought it was Ben getting out to pee. I didn't say anything, just listened. But then I heard whispering, not from inside our tent, from outside. It sounded close, just a few feet from the tent wall, low and fast. It wasn't loud enough to hear actual words, just that dry sound of someone speaking very softly, like they were trying not to be heard. I thought maybe Ben and Tom were talking outside. Maybe one of them couldn't sleep. I waited for a while. The whispering went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. I didn't hear anyone walk off. No footsteps, no more zippers. Just quiet. I must have drifted off again because the next thing I remember is morning light coming through the nylon. When we all got up, I asked if anyone had gotten out of the tent during the night. Ben said no, he'd slept straight through. Tom said the same. I asked if they heard whispering. They both just looked at me. You sure it wasn't a dream? Tom asked. I said I wasn't sure. Maybe. I didn't push it. We all brushed it off. We made breakfast, packed some snacks, and went hiking again. None of us mentioned it for the rest of the day. I try not to think about it, but something about that whispering stuck with me. Our last night was uneventful. We sat by the fire longer than usual, played cards, joked around. Nobody wanted to say it, but we were all trying to squeeze the most out of the trip. It was rare to get time off and be in a place like this. I didn't hear anything strange that night. No whispers, no sipis, just wind and the creek again. The next morning, we started packing up. It was a little overcast, looked like rain might be coming. We wanted to be back to the car before noon. As we were taking down the tents, Ben paused and pointed across the stream. What the hell is that? I looked. Maybe 30 or 40 yards away, just on the other side of the water, was a small green tent. Old looking, faded, kind of slumped, like it hadn't been set up well. It definitely hadn't been there when we arrived. We all stood there staring at it. Tom said maybe someone came in while we were asleep, but that didn't make sense. The spot was way too remote, and the ground was soft, mud near the stream, patches of flattened grass everywhere. If someone had hiked in, we would have seen tracks, broken branches, something. We crossed over to check it out. There was no one around. No sounds. I called out hello, but nothing answered. The tent was zipped shut. I knelt down and opened it. Inside, there was a single rolled up blanket, dirty, matted with leaves and hair, and a plastic fork. Nothing else. No bag, no sleeping pad, no food, no clothes. Just those two things. The floor of the tent was muddy. It looked like someone had slept in it recently, but there were no dry bags or shoes. Nothing personal. It wasn't even staked properly, just sort of sagging, like whoever put it there didn't care if it stayed up or not. What really got to me, though, was the path. A narrow trail, just wide enough for a single person, worn down through the grass and weeds. It led straight from the tent to our campsite. Not toward the trail, not toward a road, just to our site. It wasn't a game trail. It was too narrow for deer and too neat. The grass on the path was pressed flat, like someone had been walking it over and over. We looked at each other. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. Then Tom said we should go. Now, we didn't argue. We packed fast. 10 minutes later, we had our gear on and were hiking out. None of us spoke for the first hour. Every sound made me turn, branches snapping, leaves rustling. I kept expecting to see someone step out from the trees. We didn't stop until we reached the ranger station. We signed out of the logbook and got in the car. I remember looking back at the trees as we drove off, half expecting to see that green tent tucked somewhere in the shadows. The ride home was quiet. Nobody brought up the tent. Nobody talked about the whispering or the zipper. We were all tired, sure, but it felt like more than that. Like nobody wanted to be the one to say it out loud. A week later, I texted Ben. I asked if he'd been thinking about that tent. He replied right away, yeah, I keep going over it in my head. Still doesn't make sense. I haven't been camping since. I still hike, still get outside, but something about sleeping out in the open, away from everyone, doesn't feel the same. I looked up missing persons cases in that area later. Didn't find anything recent. I thought about calling the local ranger station just to report the tent. But what would I say? There was no sign of crime, no body, no proof anyone was even there. Just a whisper at night, a tent that appeared out of nowhere, and a trail worn straight to where we slept. It was early May when my girlfriend and I decided to go camping at Briar Ridge State Park. It was the kind of trip we'd talked about for months, but never got around to. Life had been loud lately, jobs, errands, deadlines, and we both needed quiet. The kind of quiet you only get deep in the woods. We packed light but smart. Sleeping bags, 2 backpacks with clothes, some dry food, marshmallows, a portable stove, a lantern, and my little Bluetooth speaker. I even remembered the bug spray and a lighter for the fire. We drove out on a Friday afternoon, took the winding back roads until the pavement gave way to dirt, and finally reached the parking lot at the trailhead. There were only 2 other cars there. That was a good sign. We signed the park's logbook and started the hike in. It was about 3 miles to our site number 14, tucked in between a low ridge and a bend in the river, surrounded by pine and birch trees. No other sites nearby, and no cell signal. The air was clean. The wind moved in the trees like a whisper you couldn't quite hear. Everything was green and soft and slow. We got there around 5 p.m. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, golden light pouring through the branches. We set up the tent together, one of those easy pop-up styles, but it still took longer than it should have because the ground was a bit uneven and we kept shifting it to find a flat patch. Eventually, we got it staked and zipped, then gathered some fallen branches for a fire. I got it going while she sorted our food. The smell of smoke and pine filled the air. We roasted hot dogs and then marshmallows, laughing when they caught fire and turned black. I played music from my phone, just soft, easy stuff. The kind of music that fills the silence without breaking it. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. We're just glad to be out there. By the time the sky turned fully dark, the fire was crackling steady and the stars were starting to show through the gaps in the canopy. She was getting sleepy, said she'd go to the tent and read for a bit. I told her I'd stay by the fire a little longer. The warmth, the quiet, the stars. It felt too good to leave just yet. So I sat there alone. The woods were dark beyond the circle of firelight, but not completely silent. I could hear insects chirping, the occasional creak of branches, maybe the distant sound of the river. Nothing out of the ordinary. I leaned back against a log, stared up through the trees, and let the fire die down a little. My phone still played music softly on the ground next to me. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not from the trail. Not the crunch of someone walking up the gravel path. These came from behind the trees. The kind of sound you hear when someone's trying not to make noise, but still stepping on twigs and leaves. A rustle, then a crack. Then nothing. Then another soft step. I paused the music. The silence that followed was thick. The kind that presses on your ears. I sat there for maybe 10 seconds, not moving, just listening. The fire popped behind me. The footsteps didn't continue, but something about it wasn't right. Animals make noise, sure. You hear squirrels and deer all the time when you're out camping. But this, it sounded too heavy, too controlled, like someone was deliberately choosing each step. I stood up slowly, picked up the flashlight from the log, and turned it on. Its beam cut through the dark like a sword. I aimed it toward the direction of the sound, between two thick tree trunks, maybe 30 feet away. That's when I saw it. A silhouette. Tall. Still. Just standing there behind the trees. My breath caught. I kept the light steady on the shape. Didn't say anything. Didn't move. But the figure didn't move either. Just stood there. Not shifting, not swaying, not walking. It wasn't hunched or crouched like an animal. It wasn't moving like someone hiking back to their campsite. It was just watching. I finally shouted. My voice felt small in the night air. I said something, probably hello, or who's there, but nothing came back. Just the wind in the trees and the sound of my own heartbeat. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and stepped forward, shining the beam straight onto the spot where I'd seen the figure. Gone. There was nothing behind those trees but darkness and pine needles. I scanned the area with the light. I moved it side to side, up and down. Nothing. No figure. No sound. I stood there for a few minutes, listening again. The forest felt too quiet now. That strange kind of quiet that makes the hairs on your arms rise up. No insects. No crickets. Just the soft hiss of the dying fire. Eventually, I walked a full circle around our site. I didn't want to panic. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I imagined it. I didn't want to wake her. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept the flashlight on, fed more wood into the fire, and stayed up. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept checking the woods, walking small loops around our gear, listening hard for anything out of place. Every time the fire dimmed, I'd jump a little and stoke it again. At some point, the sky started getting lighter. The sounds of birds came back, and the forest slowly began to feel normal again. When the sun was fully up, I walked over to where I'd seen the figure. It wasn't far, just behind a few trees. That's when I found the footprints. Deep ones, not like casual walking prints. These were pressed down hard, like someone had stood there for a while. The heels and toes were defined. No other tracks leading toward or away. Just a pair of prints, standing in place. Facing our campsite, I crouched and looked at them closely. They weren't ours. My boots didn't match, and she hadn't left the tent since going in the night before. I didn't tell her right away. I made breakfast like normal, instant oats and coffee. But I couldn't fake it for long. She knew something was wrong. Eventually, I told her what I saw, and I showed her the prints. She got real quiet, then said she wanted to go home. We didn't talk much while packing up. Everything felt different. The woods felt smaller somehow, less like a place of peace, and more like something that had been watching us. We kept glancing over our shoulders. I remember the sound of the zipper on the tent, the clink of our cookware, the way the wind rustled through the trees like it was whispering secrets we couldn't hear. We hiked back in silence, passing no one, just miles of trail and trees. Back at the car, I looked over my shoulder one last time. Nothing there, but I didn't relax until the tires hit pavement again. When we got home, I kept thinking about those prints. I even took pictures of them, though they didn't come out that well. Too much light and shadow. But know what I saw? They were real. Someone was standing there, just beyond our campsite, in the middle of the night. Not moving, just watching. It's been months now. We haven't gone camping since. Sometimes I still think about how deep those footprints were. How whoever it was didn't try to talk, didn't move, just stood there. And I keep wondering, how long were they watching before I noticed? We left early in the morning. I picked up my nephew, Lucas, just after 6 a.m. His mom handed me his backpack and reminded him to behave. Lucas was 10, smart for his age, but quiet. He liked nature, which was part of why I offered to take him. I figured a weekend in the Ozarks would be good for both of us. I'd been stressed from work, and I hadn't gone camping in years. Lucas had never been. The drive took a little over 4 hours. We stopped once to stretch and grab some gas station snacks. Lucas asked about what animals lived in the forest: bears, snakes, mountain lions. I told him not to worry. Said the most dangerous thing out there was probably a raccoon with an attitude. We arrived at the trailhead just past noon. The sun was out, warm, but not too hot. I gave Lucas a walking stick and we hiked in. It was a solid 3-mile walk to the site I had in mind, down a winding trail with old trees leaning in over the path. The air smelled of pine and damp leaves. There were no other cars at the trailhead, no signs of other hikers. It felt like we had the forest to ourselves. The campsite I picked sat near a bend in a creek just below a hill. There was a flat area for the tent and a fire ring someone had built out of stones. You could hear the creek running softly all day. It was peaceful. We set up the tent together, rolled out our sleeping bags, and gathered sticks for the fire. Lucas chased a frog near the bank while I got the fishing rods ready. That afternoon, we fished. Lucas caught 2 small sunfish, nothing worth keeping, but he was proud. I let him reel in one I caught, just to give him the feeling. We cooked hot dogs over the fire, added some of those foil-wrapped cheesy potatoes, and ate as the sky turned pink behind the trees. Lucas talked more than usual, asked about survival stuff, how to tell direction without a compass, what berries you could eat. He said he wanted to come camping every summer. I told him we'd make it a tradition. Around sunset, I was breaking branches to keep the fire going when Lucas looked up from where he was sitting and said, "I saw a boy down by the creek." I looked up. "Where?" He pointed toward the bend in the creek, where the trees got thick and the water slowed down in a little pool. I squinted. Nothing, just brush and shadows. I asked if he was sure. He nodded and kept staring that way. I walked over, looked around. There was nothing. No footprints, no splash, no sound. It was probably his imagination, I figured. Kids see things in the woods, especially when it starts getting dark. I didn't want to make a big deal of it, so I told him to help me with the lantern. We stayed up a little longer, roasting marshmallows and talking. Lucas didn't bring up the boy again. He seemed okay. When it got properly dark, we zipped up the tent and got into our sleeping bags. I kept my flashlight nearby, just in case. The woods were quiet except for the creek and the wind through the trees. I fell asleep faster than I expected. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound, a soft crunching, like footsteps on dry leaves. I didn't sit up, just opened my eyes and stayed still. I figured maybe a deer had wandered near the site. I listened for a few minutes. The sound stopped. I didn't hear anything else. I checked on Lucas. He was sleeping fine. I drifted off again. The next morning, I woke up before Lucas. I boiled some water for instant coffee and took a little walk to stretch. I walked toward the creek, same spot Lucas had pointed at the night before. The ground there was muddy from where the bank dipped into the water. That's when I saw the footprints. They were small, barefoot, just 2 sets. One set came from the water, the other led toward our tent, and then back again like someone had walked up to the tent in the night and turned around. I crouched down and looked closer. The prints were real, not animal, not imagination. A real kid had been walking around out here barefoot in the middle of the night. I looked around, scanned the trees, the bank, the trail. Nothing. No one. Just birds and the wind. I didn't want to scare Lucas. When he woke up, I kept things normal. We ate breakfast, oatmeal and leftover hot dogs. I packed slowly but deliberately. Lucas asked if we were staying another night. I told him I thought a storm might come through, even though the sky was clear. He didn't argue. We cleaned up, packed everything, double-checked the site. I kept looking around while we worked. That feeling of being watched had crept in and wasn't going away. Lucas asked again if I'd seen the boy. I told him no. We hiked out in silence for the first mile. Lucas was tired. His backpack kept sliding off one shoulder. I carried it the last stretch. When we got to the trailhead, I let him sit on the hood of the truck while I loaded our gear. That's when I saw the bulletin board. It was old and sun-bleached, held up by 2 wood posts next to the parking lot. Mostly hiking maps, fire warnings, and a few missing posters. I hadn't paid attention to it when we arrived, but one paper stood out. It was a missing child poster. Faded, but still legible. A boy about Lucas's age. Short brown hair, round face. Last seen 5 years ago, according to the date. The poster said he disappeared while hiking with his father. Last known location was the creek trail. I stared at it for a while. The picture was grainy, but something about the eyes felt familiar. I looked back at Lucas. He was kicking gravel, totally unaware. I didn't say anything, just got in the truck, started the engine, and drove. On the way home, I thought about the footprints again, about what Lucas had seen. He wasn't lying. That much I was sure of now. And those prints weren't some animal or trick of the light. They were human. A kid, barefoot, alone. I kept thinking about what could have happened. Maybe the boy wandered off years ago and got lost. Maybe he died out there, his body never found. Or maybe, somehow, he never left. Maybe he survived, living off the land. Scared, hiding, watching people come and go. Maybe he saw us, came to look. But if he was alive, why wouldn't he say something? Why not ask for help? Maybe after 5 years, he didn't trust people anymore. Maybe he didn't want to go back. Maybe he couldn't. I reported the footprints to the local ranger station. Gave him the location, explained what I saw. The ranger was polite, but didn't seem too convinced. Said it was probably just another camper or a kid messing around. I didn't argue, but I know what I saw. Lucas still talks about the trip sometimes. He wants to go back. I tell him maybe next year. But I haven't taken him, and I don't plan to. I still think about that boy, alone in the woods, following us in the dark, watching us from the trees. I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed another night. If I hadn't packed up, if he would have come closer. And I wonder how many others saw him too, just for a second, by the water, then looked away. I decided to go solo camping in Arizona in late October. I'd done solo trips before, but always in places closer to home, forests, lakes, even some deep desert stretches near Nevada. But this time I wanted to push a little further out to really feel that isolation. Arizona had always fascinated me. The red rocks, the dry air, the endless sky at night. I researched a few less popular trails and chose one that followed an old ranch right a few miles off any paved roads. I planned to hike 5 miles in, set up camp for a couple nights, and just disconnect. I packed light, but smart. Tent, sleeping bag, dry food for 4 days, extra water, first aid kit, multi-tool, a solar power bank, 2 sets of fresh batteries, and most importantly, a compact radio with GPS and a built-in weather scanner. I also brought a flashlight, a headlamp, and my phone, though I expected no signal out there. Everything was fully charged the night before. I double-checked every battery, every device. I had backup power and backups for the backups. I was prepared. I drove out early and parked at a small pullout near the trailhead. There were no other cars. It was a weekday and late in the season, so I wasn't surprised. I strapped on my pack and started walking. The trail was dry and rocky, weaving through dusty hills and patches of cactus. After about 2 hours, I left the trail and headed further west toward a shallow ravine I had marked on my map. It was flat enough to pitch a tent and surrounded by low ridges that offered a bit of cover. No trees, just scattered shrubs and a few scraggly mesquites, but I liked how quiet it felt. By the time I set up camp, the sun was dipping low and the temperature had started to drop. That first night went fine. I ate a protein bar, drank some water, and sat outside my tent with the radio on low, scanning for weather updates. Nothing unusual, clear skies, cold temps, no storms. The moon was bright and full, casting everything in a pale glow. It got cold fast after dark, and by 10 p.m., I was zipped up in my sleeping bag. I left the radio on next to me, not for music or news, just as a familiar sound. Its soft hum helped me sleep. The second day was uneventful. I walked around the area, followed a dry creek bed for a couple miles, and saw what looked like coyote tracks in the sand. Not unusual. I didn't see or hear any other animals. No planes, no distant traffic. Just complete stillness, like the desert had swallowed everything. I liked it that way. That afternoon, I read a paperback I'd brought, boiled water for some dehydrated food, and sat in the shade of a boulder. It wasn't until nightfall that things changed. It started small. I turned on the radio around sunset and noticed it didn't light up. I checked the power button. Nothing. I assumed the batteries had died, so I swapped them with a fresh set. Still nothing. I grabbed my flashlight to get a better look, but the beam flickered once, then died completely. That's when I felt a sliver of unease. I wasn't panicking yet. Things fail sometimes. It's easy to get careless with battery life out in the cold. I took my phone out, figuring I'd check the time. The screen was black. I pressed the side button. No response. I held it down. Nothing. I remember sitting back on my heels, surrounded by silence, looking at the 3 devices I had just used yesterday, and suddenly none of them were working. My first thought was that the cold had drained the batteries faster than usual. That happens sometimes. But I had my solar power bank, fully charged, packed in my bag. I pulled it out and plugged in my phone. As soon as I connected it, a loud burst of static blared from the phone speaker. I yanked it out of the charger. The static stopped. I sat still for a long moment, just holding the phone in my lap. Then I plugged it back in. Again, sharp, violent static. No voice, no transmission, just a wall of white noise, so loud it felt physical. I unplugged it again. My mouth had gone dry. I picked up the radio, turned it on again, hoping maybe it had just been the batteries earlier. Same static. No blinking light this time. Just noise. I don't know what scared me more, the sound or the fact that it didn't make any sense. Electronics fail, sure. Batteries die. But not like this. Not all at once. Not when they worked perfectly the day before. And not when they go dead, just to come alive again with nothing but static. And it wasn't soft static like weak signal fuzz. It was intense, like something was jamming everything nearby. I felt a deep, physical wrongness. I had no connection to anything. No GPS. No light. No clock. Nothing. I didn't wait to see if it would get worse. I stuffed everything in my bag as fast as I could. My tent was still up, but I didn't bother breaking it down. I left it there, grabbed my essentials, water, pack, power bank, knife, and started hiking out. I didn't even have a flashlight. Only the moonlight guided me. Luckily, the sky was clear, and the trail was just visible enough to follow if I moved slowly. My heart pounded the whole time. I kept stopping to listen. The desert was too quiet. I couldn't hear anything. Not wind, not insects, not even distant coyotes. Just the crunch of my boots on the dry dirt and the occasional rattle of gravel. At one point, I heard something behind me. Not close, not loud, but enough to make me stop cold. A small shuffle, then silence again. I turned, looking back down the slope I had just climbed, but saw nothing. I stood still for at least 2 minutes, trying not to breathe too loudly, but the sound didn't come again. I kept moving. I made it back to the trailhead a little before dawn. My legs were shaking, partly from exhaustion, partly from nerves. My truck was still there. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there for a minute with my head against the steering wheel. Then I turned the key. The truck started fine. The dashboard clock blinked on. It was just after 5 a.m. I plugged in my phone again. This time, it lit up immediately. Fully charged. The radio worked perfectly. Clear signal, quiet hum. Just like before. The flashlight flicked on without hesitation. Everything worked. I didn't drive home right away. I pulled out onto the main road and drove to the nearest gas station about 20 miles down. I got coffee, stood inside for a long time near the warmers, and watched the sun come up over the highway. I tested everything again. Phone, power bank, radio. Not a single issue. I don't know what happened out there. I didn't tell the gas station clerk anything. I didn't tell my friends when I got back, either. Not at first. I just said the trip got cut short. Later I tried to explain it. But how do you describe something like that without sounding paranoid? It wasn't ghosts. It wasn't some made-up desert monster. It felt like someone had flipped a switch on everything electronic I owned, all at once. Not to kill it, but to interrupt it, jam it, interfere. like there was a signal being broadcast deliberately, and it was localized, only out there in that one spot. I looked up jamming devices when I got back. Military grade ones exist. Some can disrupt GPS, phone signals, radios. They're usually not sold to civilians. They're illegal to use, especially on public land. But I wasn't near a base. I was at least 40 miles from any major installation, and there were no towers, no antennas, no sign of anyone out there at all. Whatever shut my gear down was precise. It didn't burn out the tech. It didn't drain batteries permanently. It just made everything useless while I was there. And that static, I can still hear if I think about it too hard. Not just white noise. It had texture. It had a rhythm almost under the hiss, like something trying to come through, but never quite making it. I never went back. I don't plan to. I drive past the turnoff now and then on my way through Arizona. The dirt road still disappears into the hills the same way. Sometimes I wonder if the tent's still there, collapsed and half buried in sand. And I still wonder, who would set up something like that, so deep in the desert? What were they trying to hide? Or worse, what were they trying to catch? My cousin Ryan and I had talked for months about doing a weekend hike. We both like getting off the grid and finding places not on maps. We grew up together and had camped since we were kids, but this time we wanted something different. Something deeper in. Something that didn't have trail signs or trash bins or the distant buzz of highways. We wanted quiet. We wanted isolation. Ryan had found an old post online. Just a couple sentences and a blurry photo. A narrow waterfall in a canyon somewhere in the hills of a national forest. No directions, no names. Just a mention that it was past the fork where the pine meets the cedar and only reachable if the water's low. It sounded vague and perfect. We packed up and drove out Friday morning. It took most of the day just to get into the general area. The roads turned from pavement to dirt, then to gravel, then to deep ruts only our Forerunner could handle. By the time we ditched the vehicle and loaded our packs, it was late afternoon. The hike itself was a mess of overgrown brush, game trails, and confusing forks. But we were good with a compass, and we had a rough idea of where the stream should run. Eventually, we found it. The stream was low, barely a trickle over smooth rocks. And just like the post had said, we passed through a grove of cedar mixing with tall pines. We followed the water for maybe an hour more, picking through boulders and ducking under fallen logs. And then we heard it, the low rush of falling water. The waterfall wasn't big, maybe 15 feet high, nestled in a narrow canyon where the rock turned darker and moss clung to the edges. A small pool at the base shimmered in the late light. Around it, the land was flat enough for a tent or two. It was secluded, silent except for the water and wind. We set up camp there. That first night was peaceful. We ate instant noodles and jerky, sat by the fire, watched the flames, and listened to the water gurgling behind us. It was colder than expected, so we turned in early. The only light was from the stars and the fire when it was still going. No other camps nearby, no voices, no headlights. It was what we came for. The next morning, we woke early and decided to explore upstream. We figured we'd trace the water as far as we could go, see if maybe there were more pools or hidden spots. We left camp set up, brought a day pack with water and snacks, and started moving. The terrain was rougher than we thought, climbing over wet rocks and around thickets. After maybe 2 hours, we found something strange. Tucked back from the water, half hidden by trees, was a blue tarp. It had been strung up between two thin trees, sagging slightly in the middle. From a distance, we thought it was a lean-to or maybe someone's old emergency shelter. But when we got closer, we saw it wasn't shelter at all. The tarp was covering something. We lifted the edge. Beneath it, the ground had been cleared and smoothed out, and covering that patch of dirt were bones. Dozens of them, small and large. Skulls, spines, ribs, femurs. Every bone had been cleaned. No meat, no skin, white and dry, arranged in patterns. Rows, arcs, spirals. Some of the skulls were perched on top of rocks or sticks like they'd been posed. There was no blood, no smid, just silence and bones. We stood there for a long time, not speaking. It didn't look fresh, but it didn't look old either. We didn't touch anything, just stared. After a while, we backed away. At first, we said nothing, just walked. Maybe it was a hunter, we thought, or a biologist studying local wildlife. But it didn't look like science. It looked like someone had taken time with it. Intention. We didn't know what kind of animals they were, not exactly. Some were probably deer, others smaller. Maybe raccoons, maybe foxes. One skull looked almost canine. Another was cracked straight through the middle, but still laid out with the others. We didn't find anything else on the hike. No gear, no signs of other camps. Just that tarp. We got back to our site around mid-afternoon. The fire pit was as we left it. Tent was zipped, our packs untouched. Everything was normal. The tarp scene started to feel distant, like something we imagined or exaggerated in memory. We made a small fire, boiled water, and ate quietly. The mood had changed. Not panic, just that feeling in your chest that something's off and you're trying to ignore it. We didn't talk much, just watched the fire as the sky went dark. That's when I noticed it. Behind the tent, maybe 10 feet back, another tarp had been hung. Blue, same as before. It was strung up between two trees, sagging just like the other one. But this one hadn't been there when we left. I was sure of it. We had walked all around the tent earlier, looking for dry wood. Nothing had been behind it, but now it was there, silent, still, no wind. I got up slowly and walked around the fire to get a better look. Ryan followed. The tarp wasn't covering bones, just one thing, a deer's skull, clean, white, upright. It had been placed carefully in the center of the tarp, facing the fire, not tilted, not knocked over, balanced and stable like it had been set down by someone who took their time. We didn't speak. We didn't move the tarp. We didn't touch the skull. We just sat back down, watching the fire. Every few minutes, I'd glance over my shoulder at the tarp, just to see if it had shifted. It never did. It stayed right there with that skull facing us. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the tent, staring at the ceiling, listening. Every small crack of a branch or gust of wind set my nerves off. I imagined someone standing just beyond the firelight, waiting, watching. I didn't want to unzip the tent and check. At some point, maybe a few hours before dawn, I must have dozed off. I woke when the sky was just turning gray. Ryan was already outside. He was packing. We didn't need to talk. We broke down camp quickly, packed fast and tight. Didn't even make breakfast. We didn't bother to check the tarp again. We didn't even look at it. We just got our gear and started walking. The hike out felt longer. The woods seemed quieter. Every turn in the trail felt like it could be watched. My eyes kept moving to the trees, the underbrush, the shapes in the distance. But we didn't see anyone. No movement. No voices. Just that low buzz in the back of my skull. That constant awareness that something wasn't right. When we got back to the Forerunner, we both sat in silence for a while. I think we were waiting for something. A sound, a sign, a reason to go back and check again. But nothing came. So we got in and drove. We didn't talk much on the way home. Just the basics, gas, food, directions. Neither of us wanted to bring it up. Not yet. It felt like speaking it out loud would make it worse. Like it would pull whatever had happened back toward us. Later, we looked up local hunting areas, wildlife studies, anything that could explain it. Nothing matched. No reports. No projects. No trail cams. No other hikers had posted about the place. It was like the post we found had vanished too. We didn't report it. What would we say? We found bones, and someone moved a tarp near a tent. It wasn't a crime scene. It wasn't anything illegal. Just something that didn't feel right. Something we'll probably never understand. I haven't camped off-grid since. Ryan hasn't either. Sometimes I think about the skull. How clean it was. How it was placed. Not tossed. Not buried. Just positioned. Like someone wanted us to see it. Like they were trying to say something without speaking. And I keep thinking about the fact that we never heard a sound. Not when the tarp was hung. Not when the skull was placed. Whoever did have been close. Close enough to see when we left camp. Close enough to move in, set it up, and get out without making a sound. And maybe they were still there when we got back. Maybe they were just a few feet further into the trees, watching from behind the branches. Waiting. That's the part that stays with me. Not the bones. Not the tarp. The silence. I booked the Airbnb kind of last minute. I'd had a rough few weeks and wanted to get away. Nothing fancy, just quiet, somewhere out of the city, but not too remote. I picked this small place up in the mountains, a guest house behind someone's home. It had decent reviews and the photos looked good enough, clean, plain, nothing sketchy. I left early on a Friday morning. It was about a 4-hour drive, mostly highway, then winding roads up through wooded hills. The town itself was tiny, more like a main street with a grocery store, gas station, and a diner. A few scattered houses, lots of trees. Peaceful. When I got to the Airbnb, it was exactly like the photos. A little single-story guest house, maybe 50 feet behind a larger home. Gravel driveway, small front porch, simple layout. The owner, who I never met in person, had sent me the code for the lockbox and said to let myself in. Easy. Inside, it was basic but fine. One big room with a bed, table, couch, and kitchenette. A small bathroom off to the side. Windows on 3 walls, so it felt open and light. The back faced some woods that stretched out behind the property. No curtains on that side, but it was just trees, so I didn't think much of it. I brought in my bag, unpacked a little, and sat down on the couch. There was a binder with house rules and local info, and a handwritten note saying enjoy your stay. It all felt normal. After the drive, I was tired, so I made some pasta on the hot plate, ate, and just chilled out. I didn't even turn on the TV. I just watched the sun go down through the windows, trees swaying in the breeze, the light fading to blue and then dark. That first night was uneventful. I went to bed early, maybe around 10. It was quiet. The mattress was firm but comfortable. The only sound was the wind in the trees, and sometimes a creak from the house settling. I fell asleep fast. It was around 3 in the morning when I woke up, not from sound, just suddenly wide awake. My heart was beating harder than usual, like I'd been in the middle of a bad dream, but couldn't remember it. I listened, nothing, just silence, not even wind. I laid there for a while, staring up at the ceiling, trying to figure out what felt off. Then I realized the room wasn't totally dark. There was a faint light coming from the window that faced the backyard. Moonlight, maybe, but it looked wrong. It wasn't the soft, blue kind of light you expect at night. It was warmer, dim yellow. I sat up and looked. Way back at the edge of the trees, maybe 30 or 40 feet into the woods, I saw a light. Not moving, just there, like a lantern or flashlight sitting on the ground. I thought maybe it was a neighbor or someone camping, but there weren't supposed to be other houses behind the property. The listing had said private, surrounded by nature. I stared at it for a while. No movement, just a pale circle of light between the trees. Eventually I told myself it was probably nothing, someone hiking, or maybe a trail I didn't know about. I got back in bed, pulled the blanket up, and, after a long time, fell back asleep. Next morning, I went out there to check. I walked to the tree line and looked around. Nothing. No path, no sign of anyone. Just undergrowth and forest floor. I wandered a little, maybe 20 feet in, but saw no evidence of a campfire or lantern or anything like that. It was quiet, and I felt kind of stupid for worrying. The rest of the day, I tried to relax. I drove into town, got some groceries, and had a late lunch at the diner. Chatted a bit with the waitress, who was friendly in that small town way. Curious but polite. I didn't mention the light. It didn't seem important. I told myself not to overthink things. That night, around the same time, just after 3, I woke up again. This time there was a sound. A soft tapping. Not fast, not loud. Used talp, talp, talp. It was coming from one of the windows. The one by the couch. I froze. Stayed in bed, barely breathing. The tapping stopped for a few seconds. Then started again, slower. 3 or 4 taps, then silence. I got up quietly and grabbed my phone. No messages, no alerts. I didn't turn on the flashlight. I just moved slowly toward the window and looked out through the glass. Nothing, just dark trees and my own reflection. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, waiting. It didn't happen again. Eventually, I turned on one of the lamps and sat at the table. I stayed up for another hour, checking the door, locking the windows. Everything seemed fine. I felt dumb again. Maybe a branch had hit the glass. Maybe a bird. I made tea, read a little, and finally went back to bed when it started getting light. The next day, I messaged the owner through the app. I kept it casual. Said I thought I saw someone in the woods the other night and heard a noise by the window. Just wanted to know if there were other houses or trails out back. No response that day. In the afternoon, I went for a hike on a marked trail a few miles away. Tried to clear my head, but when I got back around sunset, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The window by the couch had a smudge on it. Not big, just a faint mark like the edge of a hand. The kind you'd see if someone leaned against the glass. I went outside and looked closer. There were 2 partial fingerprints. Not clean ones, just the oily shapes left behind. Right at eye level. It could have been mine, maybe from the night before. I pressed my own hand there to compare. Mine looked different, larger, clearer. These were narrow, almost dainty. I wasn't sure what to think. That night, I kept the lights on, slept in my clothes. I moved the small table in front of the door, not because I thought it would help, but because I wanted to hear if someone came in. I kept the kitchen knife by the bed, hidden under a pillow. 3 a.m. came. No tapping, no lights, just silence. I stayed up until dawn, watching the windows. When the sun was up, I walked the perimeter of the guest house. There were boot prints by the back steps. Not mine. I'd been wearing sneakers the whole time. These were heavier, with a distinct tread. I followed them back to the edge of the trees, where they disappeared into the brush. That was it. I packed my bag and loaded the car. I didn't care that I had one night left. I wasn't going to sleep another minute there. Before I left, I looked one more time at the owner's house. It was still quiet. Curtains drawn. No sign of movement. I hadn't seen anyone go in or out the whole time I was there. As I got in the car, I noticed something on the ground near the back tire. A cigarette butt, still fresh. I don't smoke. No one I know smokes. I hadn't seen a single smoker in town. It wasn't the brand that bothered me. It was where it was, right near where I'd parked the day before. Someone had been standing there, watching, maybe while I was inside. I drove to the nearest gas station, used their Wi-Fi, and messaged the owner again. Said I was checking out early. I didn't explain. I didn't ask for a refund. I just said I'd left the key in the lockbox and thanked them. Still no reply. Later, back home, I left a review. It was vague. I mentioned noise at night, said it didn't feel totally private. I didn't want to say too much. I didn't want whoever had been watching me to know how much I'd seen. A few days later, I checked the listing again. It was gone. No, currently unavailable. Just gone, like it had never been there. I tried searching the host's name. Nothing. Tried using the address I'd written down. Google Maps still showed the house, still had the satellite view. But when I searched for nearby areas again, it didn't show up. Not even in the hidden or out-of-the-way options. I emailed Airbnb support. They said the listing had been deactivated and that they couldn't give me any more information for privacy reasons. I didn't push it. A week after I got home, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a white envelope, handwriting in pencil. Inside was a piece of paper, folded once. It said in all caps, "You shouldn't have looked." That was it. No signature. No other message. I called the police. Gave them the envelope. Told them everything. They took it seriously, opened a case, but nothing came of it. The letter had no fingerprints. No postmark. Someone had probably dropped it in a mailbox manually. I changed my phone number. Set up cameras at my apartment. Got into the habit of checking every window and door before bed. For a while, I even slept with the lights on. It's been months now. Nothing else has happened. No letters. No weird messages. I've checked the house on Google Street View a dozen times. Still there. Still looks normal. But I haven't gone back. I won't. I still think about the window, the tapping, the prints, the cigarette. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. They never tried to break in. They never made a sound when I was awake. But they knew where I was. They knew what time I slept. They knew I was alone. And the worst part? They weren't in a rush. They were patient. And that letter, they knew where I lived. That meant whoever was had followed me, or already knew me, or had access to my booking info. Airbnb couldn't, or wouldn't, tell me who the host was. The name on the listing didn't come up anywhere else. The phone number had gone dead. It was like they'd vanished. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed that last night. If I'd ignored the signs, told myself it was all in my head. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up around 3 a.m. I always check the window. I had to be in the city for a weekend tech conference, Friday through Sunday. Nothing fancy, just a mid-tier event with a few panels and networking sessions. I booked my Airbnb a month ahead. It was a small studio apartment in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. The listing had good reviews, clean photos, and the host had a verified profile. It was close to the subway and within walking distance of the convention center. That's what I needed. I arrived Friday around 3 p.m. The host had left instructions for a keypad lock. No need to meet anyone in person. I entered the code, the door clicked, and I stepped inside. The place was nice, cleaner than I expected. White walls, hardwood floors, small kitchenette, a queen bed with fresh linens, and a sliding glass door that led to a little balcony overlooking the street. The fridge was empty except for a couple of water bottles. The bathroom had sealed toiletries, folded towels, and even a scented candle on the windowsill. The AC was already on, set to a comfortable 72. I remember thinking this host was really professional. The kind of person who ran multiple properties. Efficient, everything in its place. There was one odd thing. A large mirror mounted directly on the wall facing the bed. Not a decorative mirror or a dresser-mounted one. Just a big, rectangle slab of glass set into the wall, about 4 feet wide and maybe 5 feet tall. It didn't look out of place exactly, but it drew my attention right away. There wasn't much else in the apartment. Minimal furniture, clean lines, so the mirror just stood out. And not in a good way. I tried to ignore it. Told myself I was being weird. Lots of modern rentals have accent mirrors. Maybe it made the room feel bigger. Maybe people like taking selfies with natural light. I unpacked my bag, charged my phone, and walked to the conference center to check in. The rest of Friday was uneventful. I had dinner by myself at a nearby diner. Back at the Airbnb, I scrolled on my phone for a while, took a shower, and went to bed around midnight. I slept fine mostly, but Saturday was different. The day itself was normal. More panels, lots of walking, free coffee. I came back to the apartment just after 6 p.m. and decided to rest for a bit before going out to eat. I lay on the bed and stared at my phone, but I kept glancing at the mirror. The way it reflected the bed made it feel like I wasn't alone. The more I looked at it, the more I realized I couldn't see my reflection perfectly. The lighting was off. Even during the day, the glass looked dimmer than it should. Not like a real mirror, more like a tinted window. That evening I ordered takeout and ate on the balcony. There were people walking below, laughing, riding bikes. The world outside felt normal. But inside that studio, something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. I felt watched. Not like I have anxiety watched. Something sharper than that. Focused, like a needle pointed directly at me from across the room. I tried to sleep early that night. Around 11:30, I got into bed and pulled the covers up. I turned off the bedside lamp, but left the bathroom light on with the door cracked open. The mirror stared back. I turned onto my side to avoid looking at it, but after a few minutes, I felt a pull. I turned back, still just the same dark reflection. My body, the bed, the room. But something was off. I sat up and stared at it for a while. Then I got out of bed and walked up to it. When I tapped on the glass, it gave a dull, hollow sound. Not like a wall-mounted mirror. No resonance. It felt like it was over space. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I turned on my phone flashlight and shined it around the edges of the mirror. That's when I noticed a gap. A tiny one, maybe the width of a coin, running along the bottom edge. The mirror wasn't sealed flush with the wall. There was a space. I leaned closer and tried to peek inside, but I couldn't see anything. For a few minutes, I just stood there. Then I reached for the edge of the mirror and tugged. It didn't budge. I tried again, this time gripping harder near the corner. It creaked. One side shifted slightly. It wasn't bolted to the wall, just set into a frame. I pulled harder, and the mirror came free. Behind it, there was an opening in the wall, a shallow cavity, maybe 2 feet deep. And inside that space, directly in the center, was a mounted camera. Small, black square. A single green LED glowing faintly on the side. There were wires running out the back of it and down into the wall, probably to wherever the feed was being sent. Below it sat a small shelf with what looked like a hard drive or maybe a network device. I didn't touch it. I couldn't even move. I stood there, staring into that hollow space, my heart hammering in my chest. For a second, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My mouth went dry. I backed up slowly, still holding the mirror by one edge. I propped it gently against the wall and stepped away. I couldn't stay there. I threw on my jeans, shoved my laptop and chargers in my backpack, and grabbed my duffel bag. I didn't even bother folding anything. I left the mirror exactly where it was, half-propped, open like a door to something foul. I walked out the door and locked it behind me, then sat in my car for a few minutes, shaking. I opened the Airbnb app and messaged the host. I didn't accuse them directly, just said I found something extremely concerning in the apartment and was leaving early. I requested a refund for the second night and reported the listing through the app. Then I drove to a 24-hour diner and stayed there until nearly 4 a.m. I couldn't bring myself to book another Airbnb. I ended up calling a mid-range hotel a few blocks away and paid for one night. Checked in, locked the door, deadbolt, and chain, and kept all the lights on until sunrise. I never heard back from the host. Not the next day, not the day after. No message, no refund, no explanation. But here's the part that stuck with me the most. By the time I woke up on Sunday and checked the listing again, it was gone. Just disappeared. Like it never existed. Not just booked or unavailable. I mean, the entire listing had been pulled. When I clicked the old message thread with the host, their profile showed as no longer active. All the past listings under their name gone. I reported everything again. Through Airbnb's help center, then through email. I even attached a photo I'd snapped of the camera before I left. But no one followed up. The most I got was a generic email saying they'd escalated my concern and were looking into the matter. Weeks passed. I never got a refund. The memory stayed with me. That green LED light. The mirror that wasn't a mirror. The sick feeling that someone had been watching, recording, maybe for hours, maybe longer. I started wondering how many people had stayed there before me. If they'd ever noticed. If they'd been filmed too. Some of them probably never even looked at the mirror. Never tapped on it. Never thought twice. I got lucky in a way. At least I found it. But what really gets me now, months later, is that the listing disappeared so fast. The profile, the host, the photos, all scrubbed within 24 hours. Like someone had a system in place. Like it wasn't the first time. I stopped using Airbnb after that. Now, whenever I travel, I book hotels. Big chains, real staff, front desks, and security cameras in the lobby. I pay more, but I sleep better. I still think about that mirror sometimes. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't checked. If I'd stayed another night. If someone had been watching me live, not just recording. And most of all, I wonder who they were. Because someone built that cavity. Someone wired that camera. Someone watched those feeds. And they're still out there. I needed a break. Things have been heavy at work for months. Long hours, no sleep, and the kind of stress that creeps into your bones without you realizing it. So when I got a few days off, I decided to get out of the city. Just some time alone, a change of scenery. Nothing big. No travel plans or flights. Just a quiet place a couple hours out, somewhere I could sleep in, read, maybe go on walks. I didn't need a hotel or resort. I just wanted peace and quiet. I opened up Airbnb and searched for places within a few hours' drive. One caught my eye right away. Modern condo, all white interiors, sleek wood floors, clean design. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the rooms with natural light. The photos made it look calm, almost serene. A big bed with white sheets, spotless kitchen, even a balcony with a view of trees and sky. It looked brand new. The listing said recently renovated, quiet neighborhood, easy check-in. It had only a couple reviews, but they were both 5 stars. I didn't think much of it. I booked it for 3 nights. The drive up was uneventful. I left after lunch, took the highway most of the way, then turned off into smaller roads lined with trees and occasional houses. The sun was low when I arrived. I pulled up to a beige apartment complex. Not fancy, not bad, just normal. 4 floors, quiet street, small parking lot out front. The building wasn't exactly what I'd expected. It looked older than the place in the photos, but I figured maybe it had just been renovated inside. I got the key from a lockbox near the front door and took the elevator up. The hallway was dim, smelled faintly of dust and cleaning products. My unit was on the third floor. I unlocked the door and stepped in. Right away, something felt off. It was darker than it should have been. I turned on the light and looked around. The condo was nothing like the photos. The walls were yellowed and dull. The furniture was all mismatched. An old plaid couch with sunken cushions, a wooden coffee table scratched and stained, a fake leather armchair with a rip down the side. Everything smelled faintly of smoke. Not fresh smoke, just that stale, embedded scent that never really leaves. I walked deeper in, hoping maybe I had the wrong place or the wrong key. But no, this was the unit number on the listing. The kitchen was worse. Dishes in the sink, some with crusted food still stuck on them. A frying pan on the stove with a greasy film still on the surface. One cabinet door hung crooked, barely attached. The fridge was humming loudly. I opened it. Inside were a couple open soda cans, a container of old rice, and something in a Tupperware I didn't want to smell. I walked to the windows, hoping at least the view would be like the listing. But the floor-to-ceiling windows? Boarded up. From the inside, someone had taken thick plywood panels and screwed them into the frames. No sunlight came through, just thin slivers of gray light around the edges. The boards looked like they'd been there for a while. I felt this tight, uneasy pressure in my chest. I'm not picky. I've stayed in older places before. But this wasn't just old or worn down, it felt wrong. The listing had been a lie. This wasn't a modern condo. This was someone's rundown sublet. Or worse, I turned to leave. I wasn't going to sleep here. I didn't even want to sit down. I reached for the door, grabbed the handle, and it didn't turn. It was one of those round knobs, and it just spun loosely. No resistance. I pulled harder. It didn't open. I twisted it again, tried pushing, pulling, nothing. I tried the deadbolt. It turned, but the door still wouldn't budge. It was jammed somehow, like it was locked from the outside. I stepped back and stared at it. Then I tried again, yanking harder, even kicking near the bottom. Still nothing. I checked for a second lock, a chain, nothing. Just a jammed handle. I tried calling the host through the Airbnb app. No response. I messaged again. Still nothing. I refreshed the page, checked the contact info. No phone number listed. Just a name and profile picture of someone smiling in front of a beach. I sat down on the edge of the bed, thin mattress, mismatched sheets, and tried Airbnb support. It took forever to get through. First, I had to go through the automated system. Then a support agent finally messaged back. They said they'd look into it and reach out to the host. No real help. I explained I couldn't get out of the unit, that the place wasn't what was shown, that it might not even be legal. I waited. Nothing. It started getting dark outside. I hadn't eaten. I didn't want to touch anything in the kitchen. I paced the small space. Every minute in there made me more restless. There were weird little details that started to bother me. An unplugged TV on a dresser with a thick layer of dust, a closet with a single coat inside, the bathroom light flickering when I turned it on, stains on the carpet near the couch. The place wasn't just old. It felt abandoned, like someone had moved out in a rush and left it half-used. I kept checking the door, turning the knob again and again. I considered calling 911, but I didn't know what I'd say. I wasn't in danger, technically, just locked in. It wasn't an emergency, not exactly. I went to the window in the bedroom and tried prying at the edge of the board. It had been screwed in tight, but the wood was old. I worked at it with a fork from the kitchen, wiggling it back and forth until one of the screws started to give. It took over an hour, slow and tiring work, but I finally loosened one side enough to slip my fingers in. I wedged it open little by little until I could push the board away. Behind it was a standard sliding window. I unlocked it and pushed up. It opened. Thank God. Outside was the small gap between buildings and a drop down to a patch of dead grass behind the lot. I was on the third floor. Not a small jump, but there was a metal staircase just a few feet over. One of those emergency fire escapes. If I could get across the ledge, I could reach it. I slid one leg out, then the other, heart racing the whole time. I wasn't athletic, but adrenaline made up for it. I edged along the wall, gripping the window frame until I could step onto the ledge. I took one breath, reached out, and grabbed the railing of the fire escape. It held. I pulled myself onto it and climbed down fast. I didn't look back. I walked straight out of the alley and onto the sidewalk. I called my friend who lived about 40 minutes away. He answered right away. I didn't explain much, just asked if he could come get me. He said yes, no questions asked. While I waited, I stood near the curb. Didn't sit, didn't lean, just stood. A few cars passed, lights on in some windows across the street. The world felt normal again, but I couldn't shake how strange it had been up there. I got picked up about 45 minutes later. I didn't talk much in the car, just told my friend I'd explain later. Back at his place, I finally got through to someone higher up at Airbnb. They took it more seriously than the first rep. I sent photos of the boarded up windows, the dirty kitchen, the jammed door. I sent a screenshot of the listing. They said the listing had been reported already by someone else just a week before. Apparently, the photos had been stolen from another property, an actual modern condo in a different state. The one I had been in wasn't a real Airbnb. Not officially. Someone had sublet it and used fake info to make the listing. The host profile was suspended. Airbnb refunded me fully and added credit to my account. They apologized, said they'd investigate further. But that didn't undo the night I spent locked inside a stranger's apartment. Even now, I think about that door. How it opened fine from the outside. Obviously, or I wouldn't have gotten in, but didn't from the inside. I think about the boards on the windows, the smell of smoke, the old coat in the closet. Someone had lived there. Not just they lived. And whoever had set up the listing hadn't cared what shape the place was in. They just needed a way to make money off it. Maybe they didn't even expect anyone to stay. Maybe they didn't check often. I don't know. I still use Airbnb sometimes, but I triple check everything now. Reverse image search on the photos. Look up the address, even if it's hidden. Read every review, even the ones that seem minor. And I never, ever stay in a place with boarded up windows. That weekend was supposed to be peaceful. A break from work, a reset. Instead, it was claustrophobic, eerie, and unsettling in a way I still can't quite explain. There was no ghost, no threat, just a door that wouldn't open, a window that had been covered up, and a fake version of reality behind one click and a smiling profile picture. It reminded me that not everything that looks clean and bright online is real. Sometimes what's behind a photo is just an empty shell, used, forgotten, and locked from the inside. We had talked about this trip for months. It was supposed to be a weekend away from everything. Phones off, no service, no noise except what the woods gave us. There were 5 of us, me, Luke, Jordan, Evan, and Mateo. We'd all been friends since college, and once a year, we tried to do one trip like this. Somewhere remote. No campsites, no picnic tables, no other people. Just dispersed camping, where you pick a patch of open land and make it your own. Luke had found a spot online. It was deep in a national forest, about 2 hours off the main highway, up a winding gravel road that had no signage after the first 10 miles. No rangers patrolling, no marked trails. You had to bring everything you needed and pack it all back out. The nearest town was over an hour away, and we only passed one other truck on the drive-in. When we got there, we found a clearing that sat a few hundred feet from a small stream. The ground was flat, soft, and there were enough trees around to hang tarps and string lights. The stream wasn't much, but it gave us water for washing up and made just enough noise to lull you to sleep at night. The weather was perfect, clear skies, cool nights, and barely any bugs. We set up 2 tents. Me and Jordan shared one. Luke, Evan, and Mateo took the other. We built a fire ring out of rocks, gathered wood, cooked hot dogs, and drank until midnight. It felt normal, like we'd done this a dozen times before. The first night was quiet. The second night wasn't. We were sitting around the fire, just after 10, passing around a bottle of bourbon. No one was drunk, just warm. We'd grilled burgers earlier, and the fire was starting to die down. I was thinking about turning in when we heard it. A single gunshot. It echoed through the trees like it was right next to us. Loud and sharp. Not a hunting rifle. It was shorter, deeper. A pistol. Close. Closer than anything should have been. No one said anything. We all just froze. Jordan reached over and turned off the lantern. The firelight flickered, but didn't help much. Our eyes weren't adjusted to the dark. I remember my heart was racing so hard I felt sick. Another shot never came. Just one. We stayed low for a long time. Maybe 20, 30 minutes. Listening. Watching. Nothing moved. No voices. No lights. The trees were still. Eventually, Luke whispered that we should just go to bed, try to forget it. Maybe it was someone target shooting, he said. Maybe a drunk local out here being dumb. But even he didn't sound sure. None of us slept well. Every sound outside made me sit up. A twig cracking. Wind in the leaves. Once I thought I heard footsteps, but it could have been anything. I kept my headlamp next to me the whole night and didn't close my eyes until almost dawn. In the morning, it was quiet again. Clear skies. Birds. The same calm stream. We ate instant oatmeal and made coffee in silence. I could tell no one wanted to bring up the gunshot, but it was sitting heavy on all of us. When we started packing up, Jordan wandered off to pee. A few minutes later, he came jogging back. "There's something over here," he said, "like a hole, a deep one." We followed him about 100 feet past where we'd pitched our tents toward a line of thicker trees. The ground sloped slightly down, and the canopy above was tighter. Less sunlight. It felt colder there, like the trees were blocking out everything above. He pointed, and we saw it. A hole. Not wide. Maybe the width of a man's shoulders, but deep. Too deep to be an animal digging. The sides were clean, almost square, like someone had started digging a post hole or something deeper. There was a shovel lying next to it, half buried in leaves. One of those heavy-duty ones with the wooden handle and steel blade. No rust. Recently used. And near the edge of the hole was a spent bullet casing. Brass. Just sitting there in the dirt. We didn't speak for a long time. The hole wasn't finished. It was about 4 feet deep. Not enough to hide much, but it looked like someone had been working hard at it. The dirt was loose and piled on one side. The shovel had dirt on the blade. Whoever had been there wasn't finished. We all backed away slowly. Jordan asked if we should fill it in, just to be safe, but Evan shook his head. "If someone's coming back," he said quietly, "I don't want them to think we messed with it." That chilled me more than the hole itself. Because he was right. Someone had dug that hole. Someone had fired a gun. Someone might still be nearby. We packed up faster than we ever had. Threw our trash in the bags. Didn't even fold the tents properly. I kept looking over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting someone to step out from behind a tree. But the forest stayed quiet. When we got back to the truck, we all agreed we'd stop at the ranger station at the edge of the forest. Even if there weren't rangers around, someone had to manage the land. Someone had to report things like this. The station was locked when we arrived. Just a small wooden building with a few posters stapled to the outside and a drop box for permits. We wrote down what we saw, described the hole, the shovel, the bullet casing, left our names and phone numbers. No one ever called. A week passed, then a month. Nothing. I emailed the local Forest Service office. Got a generic reply back, thanking me for the report. They said they'd look into it. That was it. No follow-up. No questions. I kept checking news sites, trying to see if a body had been found or if there had been a missing person report in that area. Nothing. I set up Google alerts for the county. Still nothing. Eventually, life went on. We all got busy. I moved. Jordan got engaged. But I still think about that weekend. Sometimes I wonder if the shot we heard was meant for someone else. If we were never the target, just accidental witnesses. Maybe the sounds scared the person off, or they changed their mind, or they weren't ready to finish whatever they started. Or maybe we interrupted something. Maybe whoever dug that hole came back later, finished it, and we'll never know what went into it. I don't go camping anymore. Not like that. I'll still go to state parks, where there are rangers and other people around, but not out into open land. Not where there's no one else for miles and you can't hear a car, let alone a siren. I still think about that shovel. Why leave it? Why stop digging? And why didn't anyone care? The forest doesn't answer questions like that. It just keeps growing, keeps swallowing things up until the dirt looks like it's never been touched. But I remember, and I know what we saw. That hole wasn't for a post. It wasn't for trash. It was too narrow, too deep. It looked like it was meant for someone. I was driving through New Mexico, heading toward Flagstaff for a photography job. I hadn't booked anything ahead because I figured I'd just find a motel or something cheap on the way. But by the time the sun started to dip behind the mountains, I was already dead tired. My back was stiff from hours behind the wheel, my eyes were dry from the desert air, and the thought of another hour on the road felt impossible. I pulled over at a gas station, filled up, and started scrolling through Airbnb listings nearby. Most were too expensive or too far off route, but one caught my eye. It was a small cabin, a little outdated looking in the photos, but clean enough. Just off a quiet two-lane highway, nestled between some juniper trees. $70 a night, self-check-in, no cleaning fee. Seemed perfect. The listing had only a few reviews, all 5 stars except one buried way at the bottom. I didn't bother reading them too carefully. I just wanted a bed, a hot shower, and a roof over my head. I booked it, got the confirmation message with the address and lockbox code, and hit the road again. Another 30 minutes of winding blacktop later, I turned down a narrow dirt driveway. The trees got thicker, the road rougher. I almost thought I was lost until I saw the cabin come into view, half hidden in the dark. It was small, maybe 600 square feet, with a sagging front porch and a single outside light above the door. The bulb flickered a little, but stayed on. I got out, stretched, grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat, and walked up. The lockbox was right where the host said it would be. I punched in the code, grabbed the key, and let myself inside. The smell hit me right away, musty, like an old hotel room that hadn't been open in a while. Not terrible, just that stale air smell, like the place had been closed up for a few days. I clicked on the light. The cabin was basic. Wooden floors, a small living area with a couch and an old TV, a kitchenette with a microwave and a coffee maker, and a hallway that led to the bedroom and bathroom. Nothing fancy, but clean enough. A few personal touches, framed black and white photos on the walls, a dusty bookshelf with a row of old Western novels, made it feel a little less sterile. I dropped my bag in the bedroom. It had a double bed, a plain dresser, and a single window with blinds pulled shut. The bedding looked fresh, the sheets folded down like someone had recently made it. I figured the host probably used a cleaning service between guests. The bathroom was small, shower, sink, toilet, but functional. I turned on the water to let it warm up and undressed. The hot water felt amazing after the long drive. I stood under the stream for a while, letting the road wash off me. No thoughts, just silence and heat. Afterward, I dried off, wrapped the towel around my waist, and went back into the bedroom. That's when I noticed it. My duffel bag was unzipped. Not wide open, but just enough that the zipper was maybe 5 inches down. I stopped, towel still in hand, and stared at it for a second. I didn't remember leaving it like that. I always zip it shut, especially when I'm not rummaging through it. But maybe I was tired. Maybe I had half opened it while grabbing my toothbrush and just forgot. That's what I told myself. Still, I walked over and looked inside. Everything seemed there. My extra clothes, camera gear, charger, toiletry bag. Nothing looked disturbed. I zipped it shut and told myself to stop being paranoid. I threw on a shirt and some sweatpants, heated up a frozen burrito I had in my bag from earlier, and sat on the couch. The TV worked, but only had 2 channels, some local news and a fuzzy movie channel. I watched part of some old Clint Eastwood movie with the volume low. My phone barely had 1 bar of reception. No Wi-Fi either, just silence, and the occasional pop from the wooden walls cooling down for the night. Around 10, I brushed my teeth, made sure the front door was locked, and crawled into bed. I remember checking my phone one last time. 2% battery, no charger plugged in. I turned it off to save what little juice was left in case I needed it. Then I rolled over, pulled the blanket up, and fell asleep fast. I don't know what woke me. A creak, maybe, or a thump. Something soft, but sharp enough to snap me awake. I rolled over and looked at the clock on the nightstand. A cheap, plastic digital one. The red numbers blinked 2:47 a.m. The room was quiet. No wind, no cars outside. Just that deep, full silence you only get out in the middle of nowhere. I started to roll over to go back to sleep, but then I noticed something that snapped me fully awake. The bedroom door was open. I never sleep with doors open. Always been a thing with me, even when I lived in dorms or traveled in hotels. I always shut the door all the way. I remembered closing it that night, even pushing it until it clicked. But now it was open, just a few inches, enough to see the hallway beyond. My heart started to pound. I didn't move for a long time, just listened. Every tiny sound felt magnified. I couldn't hear anything moving. No footsteps, no breathing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I sat up slowly. My eyes were adjusting. The hallway beyond the door was pitch dark. I kept staring, expecting to see movement, anything. A shadow, a flicker, a shape. But there was nothing. Still, I didn't feel alone. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't grab my shoes. I just swung my legs over the side of the bed, picked up my phone and keys from the nightstand, and walked barefoot toward the door. Every step on the wood floor felt like it echoed. I moved down the hallway slowly. The air felt colder than before. The living room was dark except for the faint glow from the porch light outside. The front door was still locked. I checked it twice, then opened it quietly and stepped out. I didn't look back. I walked down the porch steps and across the gravel driveway to my car. My hand shook as I unlocked it. Once inside, I locked the doors, turned the key, and backed out fast. The driveway was narrow and rough, but I didn't care. I just needed to get back to the highway. Only once I hit the pavement did I feel like I could breathe again. I drove for an hour straight. No music, no lights, but the road ahead. Finally, I pulled into a truck stop, parked, and sat there until the sky started to lighten. I never went back for my stuff. I reported the issue to Airbnb, said I left early because the cabin made me uncomfortable. They refunded me half a night's stay, nothing more. I didn't push it. I didn't want to deal with calls or investigations. Later, once I was safely back home, I got curious and looked up the listing again. It was still active. Same photos, same price. I scrolled through the reviews more carefully this time. Most were glowing, shallow little notes about how quiet and peaceful the cabin was. But buried under dozens of 5-star ratings was that one. Just a single line. Asterisk felt like someone else was living there too. Asterisk. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't say anything else. No explanation, no details. But that one sentence told me everything I needed to know. Looking back now, I keep going over the details. The smell in the house, the unzipped bag, the open door. I think someone was living in that house without the host knowing. Or maybe the host knew. Maybe they rented it out cheap because they knew someone else had a key. Maybe someone lived in the attic or the basement. I didn't check either. I never even thought about it at the time. I just wanted to sleep. The more I think about it, the more things don't add up. There was a coat hanging by the front door that didn't match the weather. Too heavy for the season. I just assumed it was decorative. But now I wonder. The bookshelf in the living room had a mug sitting on top of it, filled with what looked like fresh cigarette butts. I don't smoke, and I doubt the host would leave it there for guests. The fridge had food in it, not the kind you leave for guests either. Half a carton of milk, a container of leftovers, a bottle of hot sauce with dried crust around the cap. I didn't notice it all right away. Only later did it occur to me how weird it was. It wasn't staged like an Airbnb usually is. It was like someone was living there quietly and just stepped out when they saw the reservation pop up. Maybe they watched from the woods. Maybe they never left. I'll never know for sure what happened that night. I didn't see anything, didn't hear a voice, but I trust my instincts. And something in that house felt wrong in a way I can't explain. Not paranormal, not ghostly, just human. That creeping sense that someone was nearby. Close, waiting, maybe watching me through a crack in the door, or from the closet, or from behind a vent cover. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night now and check to see if my door is shut. Sometimes I check to make sure no one's living in my crawl space. It sounds crazy, I know, but once you've felt that kind of wrong, once you've stood in the dark and known someone was near you without seeing them, you don't forget it. You carry it with you. The house was an older craftsman-style home tucked in a quiet neighborhood just outside of downtown Portland. Tree-lined streets, a small porch with a creaky swing, and big old windows that faced the front yard. It looked like something from a postcard. The Airbnb listing showed only the top unit as available, a private upstairs apartment with no shared spaces. That's what caught my eye. I wanted peace and quiet for a short solo trip I planned, just to clear my head and get away from the usual routine. When I arrived, it was late afternoon. Gray skies hung low, and the whole neighborhood had a calm, almost sleepy feel. The instructions from the host were simple. Self-check-in through a keypad lock, top unit only, entrance on the side through the wooden staircase that led up to the second level. I parked my car on the street, grabbed my bag, and climbed the stairs. The keypad beeped, the door clicked open, and I stepped into what looked like a nicely kept, modest apartment. The space itself was cozy. Hardwood floors, a small but functional kitchen, a clean bathroom, and a bedroom with a queen-size bed and a view of the backyard. The host had left a small welcome note on the kitchen counter with a Wi-Fi code and a few suggestions for local cafes. There was no mention of any other tenants or shared spaces. The listing had emphasized private unit several times, and there was no reason for me to think otherwise. The first couple of nights were uneventful. I made simple meals, read a bit, streamed a few shows, and went to bed early. The upstairs unit was quiet. Outside, the occasional sound of a car or wind in the trees was the only thing I ever heard. It felt safe, comfortable, a place to relax and not think too much. On the third night, though, something changed. It started with sounds I couldn't quite place. Around 11 p.m., I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard footsteps. Not above, not from the street. Below. At first I thought it might be from outside, maybe someone walking past on the sidewalk. But the rhythm and muffled weight of the steps made it clear they were inside the house, not outside. They were slow, deliberate, like someone moving cautiously. I sat up, held my breath, and listened. The steps stopped. A soft creaking followed, like an old wooden board shifting under pressure. Then silence. I waited, for a long time, but nothing else came. Eventually, I talked myself into believing it was just the house settling. Old places make weird noises, I told myself. Maybe a pipe, maybe the wind. I went back to bed, trying not to think about it too much. The next morning, I got up and went to the kitchen to make coffee. As I opened the fridge, I noticed something off. One of the yogurt containers I'd bought was missing. At first, I genuinely thought I might have just eaten it and forgotten. But when I checked the trash, I found a plastic wrapper from a type of granola bar I hadn't brought. It wasn't mine. I don't even eat that brand. It was opened cleanly and tossed in the bin under the sink, like someone had tried to hide it beneath the rest of the garbage. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it. It was the first moment that I felt something wasn't right. Not just weird, but wrong. The noises last night, now the food. I checked the lock on the front door. Still secure. I checked the windows. All latched. There was a door in the hallway, painted the same color as the walls, almost easy to miss. I had assumed it was a closet or maybe utility access. But when I tried the handle, it was locked. No mention of this door had been in the listing, no label or sign. I knelt down and looked at the bottom. No light, just darkness under the crack. I put my ear to the door, but heard nothing. Still, something about it made my stomach tighten. I left it alone and spent the rest of the day out of the house. I walked around downtown, visited a bookstore, and had a late lunch near the river. When I came back, it was just before dusk. Everything looked the same. No signs of anything unusual. I went upstairs, locked the door behind me, and did a quick check, closets, under the bed, the bathroom. Everything seemed in order, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I emailed the host that evening. Just a simple message, asking if anyone else had access to the property or if there was supposed to be someone downstairs. I didn't mention the missing food or the wrapper. I wanted to keep it casual, not paranoid, but I never got a reply. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left the lamp on in the bedroom and stayed in bed reading until well after midnight. Around 2:30 a.m., just as I was starting to doze off, I heard again footsteps, this time slower and closer. I sat up, every muscle in my body tense. The sound wasn't coming from beneath the floor anymore. It was coming from the hallway, from the locked door. Then, asterisk click, asterisk, the sound of a doorknob turning. Just once, not fully opening, just testing it. My blood ran cold. I quietly got out of bed, grabbed the heavy chair from the small desk by the window, and wedged it under the doorknob to the entrance of the upstairs unit. The sound had stopped, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind outside, kept me on edge. The next morning, the air felt different, still and heavy. I packed up my stuff in less than 15 minutes. I took one last walk through the apartment, made sure I hadn't left anything behind, and left the key on the kitchen table. But before I left, I went back to that locked door in the hallway. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe I just needed to see it one more time. I pressed my ear to the door again, and this time I heard something, breathing. Not heavy, not loud, just a faint, steady sound of someone on the other side. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't knock. I just slowly backed away, keeping my eyes on the door the whole time. I walked out, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. I got in my car and left before the sun had fully come up. The streets were still wet from rain the night before. As I drove away, I realized I hadn't heard a single sound from any of the neighboring houses the whole time I was there. No kids, no dogs, no cars. Just that house, just me, and someone else. When I got home later that day, I checked the listing again. Still up, same description, private unit, no shared spaces. I reported it to Airbnb with everything I noticed, the locked door, the noises, the food, the missing reply from the host. I never heard back from them either. Weeks passed. I kept thinking about it. What if someone had been living in that basement the whole time? What if the door hadn't been locked that last night? I kept seeing the image in my head of someone standing on the other side of that door, listening to me move around upstairs, watching, maybe even waiting. I checked the listing one last time a month later. It was gone, removed, delisted, no trace of it, no reviews, no pictures, no address. I still don't know what was really happening in that house. I'll never know, but I do know this: someone was down there, someone who didn't want to be found, and I was sleeping just one floor above them. That thought still keeps me up at night. It started with a missing persons report. A woman named Andrea Myers had gone hiking alone in the Blue Hills Reserve a few hours out of town. It was late September. The leaves had just started to turn, red and gold patchwork across the hillsides. She posted a photo the morning she left, smiling, holding a thermos of coffee, backpack over her shoulders, boots dusty from a summer's worth of hikes. That was the last anyone saw her. I didn't know her. Not personally, but I knew the trails. I'd hiked them since I was a kid. The area wasn't wild wilderness, not like the Rockies or the Pacific Northwest, but there were parts of the Blue Hills that felt more isolated than most people would guess, especially once you left the marked trails and took the fire roads or game paths. You could walk for miles without seeing another soul. That's probably why she liked it. I get that. I've hiked alone plenty of times. It's peaceful out there. At least it used to be. The news spread fast. Social media first, then the local papers picked it up. Solo hiker missing in Blue Hills. A couple of blurry photos showed up, one of her near a rock formation I recognized, and another of her car parked at the trailhead. They said she hadn't returned home that night. Her phone last pinged around 3:40 p.m. in a pocket of the park, where cell coverage was spotty at best. That helped narrow the search. At first, people assumed the usual. Maybe she twisted an ankle. Maybe she got turned around and lost her bearings. But the first search turned up nothing. No footprints, no gear, no signs of a struggle. The rangers brought in dogs. Helicopters flew grid patterns. Nothing. The woods swallowed her. But the phone was found 8 days later. A couple, middle-aged hikers from Boston, were walking along a drainage ditch that fed into one of the smaller ponds near the far edge of the reserve. It was barely a path, not even on most maps. They spotted something shiny in the underbrush. It was Andrea's phone. The screen was cracked but intact. It was damp but still worked. Battery dead, obviously. When the authorities plugged it in and accessed it, they found a video. It wasn't long, just under 2 minutes, but it spread like wildfire. She was filming herself, holding the phone close to her face. She looked terrified. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She kept glancing over her shoulder. You could hear her breathing, sharp and panicked. She said someone was following her, that they'd been tailing her since late morning, that she'd gone off trail trying to lose them, but it hadn't worked. She didn't say much more. No name, no description, just a fear, pure and tight. At the end, she stopped suddenly, turned to look behind her, and the video ended. They found her body 3 weeks later. Some deer hunters came across it near an old, abandoned logging road deep in the reserve. Her backpack was gone, so were her shoes. She was lying under a thin layer of pine needles and leaves, as if someone had tried to cover her but hadn't put much effort into it. Her body had decomposed quite a bit in the time she'd been missing, but the coroner said she'd likely died not long after that video was taken. There were bruises on her neck and arms, defensive wounds. She'd fought, but she'd lost. The official word was that she'd been murdered. Police said the evidence pointed to a stalker, someone who knew the area well, someone who may have followed her before, maybe even on other hikes. They asked for tips, set up a hotline, interviewed dozens of people, but nothing came of it. No arrests, no suspects. That should have been the end of it. Another tragedy, another case gone cold, but I couldn't shake it because I saw myself in her, the solo hiker, the one who prefers quiet to company, the one who thinks they know the woods like the back of their hand. And because I knew those trails, every twist and bend, every switchback, every hidden corner where you could vanish and never be found, I started going out there more often, walking the same paths she might have taken, looking for something. I don't even know what. Maybe to understand what happened. Maybe to find something the cops had missed. I didn't tell anyone. Not my girlfriend. Not my co-workers. I just started going. Early mornings, mostly. Sometimes evenings. I stuck to the public trails at first, but eventually I veered off. I knew the shortcuts, the old trails no one maintained anymore. I followed drainage lines, dry creek beds, game trails. I tried to picture where she'd gone, what turns she'd made, how she'd tried to escape. One morning, I parked at the same trailhead they found her car. It was just after dawn. The sky was pale and gray, clouds hanging low. I brought a thermos of coffee and a printed map, marked with circles where I thought she might have doubled back or gone off trail. I walked for hours, stopped for lunch under a large granite outcrop. Around 2 p.m., I found the ditch where her phone had been discovered. It wasn't much, just a shallow channel carved by years of runoff. But the brush was dense. The fact that someone had tossed her phone in there told me one thing. They knew people weren't likely to find it. Not unless they got lucky. And that meant the killer knew the land well. There was something else. The more time I spent out there, the more I noticed things. Small things. The feeling of being watched. Sometimes, branches freshly broken. A cigarette, but still warm. Footprints that didn't match mine. A few times, I'd find a tree with a notch carved into it. Not initials, just a deep V, fresh enough the bark was still bleeding sap. One afternoon, late October, I followed one of those game trails deeper into the hills. It was cold, damp, the leaves slick underfoot. I came across a small clearing surrounded by dense pine. In the center was a stump, old and wide, maybe 3 feet across. And next to it was a fire ring made from carefully placed stones. Inside were blackened coals and a few burnt scraps, tin foil, maybe meat wrappers. Someone had been camping there. Recently, I stepped closer. There were zip ties on the ground. 4 of them, 2 broken, 2 intact. A short piece of paracord, a torn strap from what looked like a backpack. Everything damp, but not rotted. That's when I heard movement behind me. Just a soft shift, like weight on wet leaves. I turned fast, hard on my throat, but saw nothing. I stood there for maybe a full minute, not moving, listening, every part of me tense. Then I left. I didn't run. I didn't want to look like prey, but I walked fast. Didn't stop until I was back in my car, breath fogging the windshield, hands shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. That night, I went through Andrea's video again, frame by frame. There was a part I'd missed before. Near the end, just before she turned the phone toward whatever she thought was following her, there was a quick flash of movement behind her, between 2 trees. Just a shadow, barely visible. But I recognized the shape, the curve of the shoulder, the brim of a hat. Someone had been there. I printed the still, taped it to my wall. I didn't tell the police. I knew what they'd say, that I was obsessing, that I was seeing things, that they had no leads, and that the case was cold. So I went back. I started keeping notes. I marked every place where I saw signs, those V carvings, the campsites, the cigarette butts. There was a pattern. They formed a rough circle, maybe 5 miles across. Always just off trail, always just out of sight. Whoever this was, they didn't live out there. Not full-time, but they knew the land. They moved like they belonged. It got worse. One morning, I came back to my car after a long hike. There was a smear of mud on the driver's side mirror. Just a streak, like a finger had traced across it. I hadn't parked near mud. I checked the doors locked. No signs of forced entry. But the message was clear. Someone knew I was looking. I stopped going out alone after that. Started bringing a friend. Joe, big guy, ex-military. Not easily spooked. I told him everything. Showed him the map, the photos, the print from Andrea's video. He didn't laugh. He believed me. We went out together the next Saturday. Took a different approach. Instead of following the trails, we tried to anticipate. We looked for high ground, places with a view. If you were hunting hikers, you want to see them coming. Plan your move. We found a ridge just north of the clearing I'd seen the zip ties in. At the top was a small rock overhang, partially concealed by brush. From there, you could see almost half the reserve. We found an empty can of beans, a half-burnt matchbook, and a flattened area that looked like someone had laid a blanket there. Joe picked up a cigarette, and sniffed it. Fresh. He's been watching, Joe said. Waiting. That was when we called the police. This time they listened. They sent a small team, 4 officers plain clothes, armed. Joe and I showed them everything. The campfire ring, the ridge, the map. We waited with them at the trailhead while they went in. They were gone for hours. When they came back, they had a man in cuffs. He looked average, balding, maybe mid-40s. Cargo pants, fleece jacket. Not the monster I'd pictured. But in his backpack, they found a hunting knife, duct tape, gloves, and zip ties. Same brand as the ones I'd seen. He had no good reason for being out there. Said he was camping. Said he hadn't seen anyone all day. But they found more in his car.